Hey guys, tonight we embark on a journey through the most profound and mysterious prophecies ever recorded in the galaxy far, far away. The ancient visions that shaped the destiny of Jedi and Sith alike, the forgotten dreams that foretold the rise and fall of empires, and the cosmic whispers that still echo through the Force itself. From the earliest celestial prophecies to the visions of the Chosen One, their story is one of destiny, mystery, and the eternal dance between fate and free will. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Get into your blanket, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the deepest reaches of the unknown regions, where stars grow dim and time itself bends like light around a black hole, there exists a vision that has haunted Force users for over 4,000 years, the same vision experienced by beings who lived centuries apart, who never met, who belonged to opposing sides of an ancient war. A Jedi Master on Coruscant, meditating in the temple's highest spire, suddenly gasps as she sees twin suns setting over endless dunes. But these are not just any suns. They burn with an otherworldly fire, and beneath them stands a figure whose face she cannot see, whose destiny will reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. 300 years later, a Sith Lord deep in the tombs of Korriban experiences the exact same vision, the same twin suns, the same mysterious figure, the same overwhelming sense that this moment, whenever it occurs, will be the fulcrum upon which all of galactic history turns. And then, impossibly, a simple moisture farmer's wife on a remote desert world dreams the same dream on the very night she discovers she carries a child conceived by the Force itself. The twin suns she sees are the ones that rise each morning over her humble home, and somehow she knows with absolute certainty that her unborn son is the figure standing beneath them. But here is the mystery that has confounded scholars and seers across the ages. How can the same vision appear to beings separated by centuries? How can a prophecy show itself to Jedi and Sith, to masters and slaves, to those who serve the light and those who embrace the darkness? Tonight we will uncover the truth behind these visions, a truth so profound that it will change everything you thought you knew about prophecy, destiny, and the Force itself. For hidden within the deepest archives of the galaxy lies evidence of a conspiracy that spans millennia, a manipulation of fate so vast and intricate that even the wisest masters never suspected its existence. But I warn you, once you learn what I am about to share, you will never look at the Star Wars saga the same way again. The hero's journey you thought you knew, the villain's fall you believed you understood, the very nature of the Force itself, all of it has been guided by an intelligence so ancient and so cunning that it makes the Emperor's machinations seem like child's play. So settle in, dear listeners, as we begin our journey into the heart of galactic prophecy, where every vision tells a story, every dream hides a secret, and every glimpse of the future reveals that the past was never what it seemed to be. The chronicle begins now, in a place where time has no meaning, and the whispers of destiny echo through the stars themselves. Deep in the unknown regions, beyond the reach of hyperspace routes and imperial star charts, beyond the furthest explorations of the Old Republic and the ancient Sith Empire, there exists a place that should not be possible, a massive space station, larger than any Death Star, older than any known civilization, floating in the gravitational embrace of three dying stars, whose combined light creates perpetual twilight. This is the Nexus of Echoes, and it is here that our story truly begins. The station itself defies conventional understanding. Its hull appears to be constructed from a crystalline material that shifts between transparency and opacity, as if the very walls are breathing. Ancient symbols from a dozen forgotten civilizations spiral across its surface, glowing with a soft inner light that pulses in rhythm with something that feels remarkably like a heartbeat. You are Keeper Zan Vos, the last guardian of prophetic records, though you never chose this title and still barely understand what it means. 3 years ago, you were simply a Republic archaeologist specializing in pre-hyperspace civilizations. Then came the dreams, visions of this place, calling to you across the void, with a voice that spoke in languages you did not know, but somehow understood perfectly. The journey here nearly killed you. Your ship's navigation systems failed repeatedly, as if space itself resisted your approach. Time moved strangely during the final approach, sometimes crawling like honey, sometimes racing past in a blur that left you dizzy and disoriented. When you finally docked with the station, you discovered that according to your chronometer, the journey had taken 3 days. According to your body's biological rhythms, it had lasted 3 months. Now, as you walk through corridors that seem to stretch infinitely in both directions, you begin to understand why you were called here. The walls are lined with alcoves, thousands upon thousands of them, each containing a holocron, unlike any you have ever seen. These are not the geometric devices favored by Jedi or Sith, but organic shapes that pulse with their own inner life, as if each one contains not just information, but the very essence of the being who experienced the vision it holds. The air itself feels thick with accumulated time. Every breath you take seems to carry whispers of conversations held millennia ago, fragments of prophecies spoken before the first hyperdrive was invented, echoes of visions that shaped the course of galactic history. Sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can almost make out individual words spoken in the ancient tongues of the Celestials, the Rakata, civilizations whose names have been lost to time itself. You are not alone in this place. As you explore the endless halls, you encounter Master Lara Thorn, though encounter is perhaps too strong a word. She appears to you first as a shimmer in the air, a distortion that gradually resolves into the figure of an elderly human woman whose eyes hold the weight of centuries. Lyra has been here longer than she can remember, perhaps longer than should be possible for any mortal being. She speaks of time as a fluid thing, of days that last years and years that pass like moments. Her purpose, she tells you, was once to catalog and preserve the prophetic visions stored in this place. But somewhere along the way she began to realize that the visions were cataloging her. And then there is the echo. You first notice it as a voice that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, speaking in fragments that make no immediate sense. Sometimes it sounds like a child, sometimes like an ancient being older than the stars themselves. It speaks of things that have not yet happened as if they were distant memories, and recalls events from the distant past as if they are urgent news. The echo, Lyra explains with a sadness that speaks of long contemplation, is what remains of every being who ever experienced a true prophetic vision. Each seer, each dreamer, each force-sensitive individual who glimpsed the future left something of themselves in the cosmic web of prophecy. The echo is their collective voice, their shared consciousness, speaking across time and space to anyone with the sensitivity to hear. As you adjust to life in the Nexus, you begin to understand its true nature. This is not simply a repository of prophecies. It is a place where time itself behaves differently, where past and future intersect in ways that allow for observation and perhaps manipulation. The station exists in a temporal flux that makes it simultaneously ancient beyond measure and eternally present. The force flows differently here as well. It does not move in the gentle currents you might expect, but in vast, slow waves that carry the accumulated weight of countless visions. Sometimes these waves bring clarity, allowing you to understand prophecies that have puzzled scholars for generations. Other times they bring confusion, showing you multiple contradictory futures that all seem equally real and equally false. But it is the overall sensation that proves most unsettling. Living in the Nexus feels like being inside a vast mind that is always thinking, always dreaming, always seeing. You are not simply observing prophecies here. You are participating in the very process by which the universe contemplates its own future. And lately, something has changed. The visions are converging, all pointing towards some crucial moment that approaches like a storm on the horizon. The echo speaks more frequently now, its fragmented pronouncements becoming more urgent, more desperate. Master Thorn watches the displays of temporal energy with growing concern, noting patterns that suggest the very fabric of prophetic time is beginning to unravel. It is then that you understand why you were called here. The Nexus of Echoes is not just a library of visions, it is a cosmic early warning system, and the warning it is giving now is that something fundamental about the nature of prophecy itself is about to change forever. The summons came not as words but as a shift in the very air around you, a subtle change in the station's endless hum that spoke directly to something deep within your consciousness. Master Thorn appeared at your chamber door, her ancient eyes reflecting an urgency you had not seen before. The echo's voice, usually scattered and fragmentary, had suddenly focused into something approaching coherence, and what it spoke of filled even her centuries of experience with dread. The prophetic visions stored throughout the Nexus were awakening, not simply activating or replaying as they had done for millennia, but truly awakening, as if each vision had developed its own consciousness and was now struggling to communicate something vital. The holocrons themselves pulsed with unprecedented intensity, their organic forms writhing within their alcoves like living things in distress. You follow Thorn through corridors that seem to stretch and contract around you, the crystalline walls now blazing with prophetic energy. As you walk, you begin to understand the magnitude of what is happening. These are not mere recordings of ancient dreams, but living impressions left by the most powerful force users in galactic history. Each vision carries within it not just the image of what was seen, but the actual presence and consciousness of the seer who experienced it. Your destination is the Chamber of First Visions, a vast spherical room at the station's heart where the oldest recorded prophecies are kept. The chamber's walls curve away in all directions, covered with alcoves that disappear into misty distances above and below. The very geometry of the space seems impossible, as if it exists in more dimensions than the standard three, and indeed, Thorn explains that this may very well be the case. The first holocron you approach contains a vision that predates known galactic civilization by tens of thousands of years. As you place your hand upon its warm, pulsing surface, reality dissolves around you, and suddenly you are standing in a place that exists outside of time itself. You witness the birth of the galaxy, not as astronomers understand it, but as the Force itself experienced it. Countless worlds spinning into existence, each one a note in a vast cosmic symphony. You see consciousness emerging on planet after planet, primitive at first, then growing in complexity and power until entire civilizations become capable of touching the Force directly. But there is something else in these earliest visions, something that should not exist. You see intelligences that predate even the first stirrings of organic life, beings of pure consciousness who observe the galaxy's birth with the detached interest of gardeners watching seeds sprout. These are the architects, the first beings to achieve true mastery over both the Force and the fundamental structures of reality itself. The vision shifts, and you see these ancient entities constructing something vast and intricate, a network of energy and intention that spans the entire galaxy. It is not built of matter, but of pure force energy, invisible to most forms of detection, yet capable of influencing the development of every world, every species, every individual consciousness that will ever exist. This is the true origin of the hyperspace routes, you realize with growing awe. Not simply paths through folded space, but channels carved through the Force itself, designed to guide the evolution and interaction of galactic civilization along specific lines. The architects did not simply map the galaxy, they designed it, creating a vast experiment in consciousness development that would unfold over millions of years. As the first vision fades, you are immediately drawn to another holocron, this one containing prophecies from the Celestials, the ancient beings who inherited the galaxy from the architects. Through their visions, you witness the construction of the great machines, Centerpoint Station, the Moore installation, devices of such complexity and power that they could reshape entire star systems. But the celestial prophecies speak of something troubling. They had discovered evidence of the architect's grand design, but they had also discovered that the experiment was failing. Consciousness across the galaxy was developing along lines that the architects had not anticipated, creating imbalances in the Force that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of reality. The Celestials' response was to create their own network of influence, one designed to correct the imbalances created by the architect's system. They seeded the galaxy with artifacts and installations that would guide future civilizations away from the paths of pure logic and toward a more balanced approach to the Force. But their interventions created new problems, new imbalances that would echo through the millennia. As you experience vision after vision, a disturbing pattern begins to emerge. Every major civilization that has ever risen in the galaxy has discovered evidence of those who came before, and everyone has attempted to correct what they saw as the mistakes of their predecessors. The Rakata built their infinite empire, partly in response to celestial interference. The ancient Sith Lords developed their philosophies as a reaction to what they saw as Jedi naivety about the true nature of power. The Jedi themselves arose from even earlier Force traditions that had been influenced by Rakatan brutality. Each civilization believed it was making free choices, following its own destiny. In reality, each was responding to patterns set in motion by those who came before, patterns that stretched back to the very beginning of galactic history. The galaxy had never been free. Every war, every peace, every rise and fall of empire had been guided by invisible hands that worked across geological timescales. But the most disturbing revelation comes from the deepest and oldest visions, those that speak of the great dying. You witness civilizations that reached heights of technological and Force mastery that make even the old Republic seem primitive. Civilizations that spanned hundreds of star systems and achieved what appeared to be perfect harmony between organic and artificial consciousness, between individual will and collective purpose. And you watch them all die. Not from war or plague or natural disaster, but from something far more subtle and terrible. As each civilization approached true mastery over the Force, as they began to understand the deeper patterns that governed galactic development, they encountered something that drove them to voluntary extinction. One by one, these advanced civilizations simply stopped. Their technology was abandoned, their knowledge forgotten, their people scattered to primitive worlds where they gradually lost all memory of what they had once achieved. The visions show you fragments of what these civilizations discovered, and even these glimpses are almost too much for your mind to process. They had learned that consciousness itself was not natural to the universe, that it was an artificial creation designed to serve purposes that no organic mind could fully comprehend. They had discovered that free will was an illusion, that every choice any being had ever made was the inevitable result of patterns established at the moment of the galaxy's creation. Most terrible of all, they had learned that the Force was not a natural phenomenon, but a control mechanism, a way for intelligences beyond organic comprehension to guide the development of consciousness according to their own unknowable agenda. The light side and dark side were not opposing forces, but complementary tools in a vast manipulation that spanned cosmic time. As each civilization reached this understanding, they faced the same choice: They could accept their role as pawns in a game whose rules they could never fully understand, or they could refuse to participate, choosing extinction over servitude. Every advanced civilization in galactic history had chosen extinction. But here, in these ancient visions, you find hints of a different possibility. Some of the seers speak of a time when the patterns would begin to break down, when the controlling intelligences would lose their grip on galactic development. They prophesy a period of chaos and upheaval that would create opportunities for genuine choice, genuine freedom, for the first time in the galaxy's history. These prophecies speak of specific individuals who would arise during this period of breakdown, beings whose unique nature would allow them to perceive and potentially alter the hidden patterns that governed everything. They speak of a chosen one who would be born not of organic reproduction but directly from the Force itself, someone who would embody both light and dark in perfect balance and thus become capable of transcending the artificial duality that had been imposed upon the galaxy. But the prophecies also warn of the dangers inherent in such a being. The same qualities that would make the chosen one capable of breaking the ancient patterns would also make them vulnerable to corruption by those who understood how to manipulate the prophetic system itself. The visions show possible futures where the chosen one becomes not a liberator, but the ultimate tool of galactic control, a being so powerful that their corruption would ensure the permanent enslavement of all consciousness. As you absorb these revelations, you begin to understand why you were brought to the Nexus of Echoes. The time of prophesied breakdown has arrived. The ancient patterns are indeed failing. The controlling mechanisms are losing their effectiveness, and the galaxy stands at a crossroads that will determine whether consciousness achieves genuine freedom or falls under a more subtle and complete form of control than has ever existed before. The visions converging on the Nexus are not random events, but part of a cosmic awakening, a moment when the accumulated wisdom of all previous civilizations becomes available to guide the choices that must be made. But there are forces working to ensure that this awakening serves their purposes rather than the cause of genuine liberation. Forces that understand the prophetic system better than anyone else and have been manipulating it for their own ends across countless generations. The Echo's voice grows stronger as you delve deeper into the ancient prophecies, and you begin to realize that it is not simply the collective consciousness of past seers, but something far more significant. It is the accumulated wisdom of every civilization that chose extinction rather than servitude, every being who understood the true nature of galactic control and refused to accept it. They had not simply died. They had encoded their consciousness into the prophetic system itself, creating a hidden network of resistance that has been working across the millennia to prepare for this moment. The Nexus of Echoes is not just a repository of visions, but a command center for a rebellion that spans the entire history of the galaxy, a rebellion that has been waiting for the right moment and the right person to finally challenge the forces that have controlled galactic destiny since the beginning of time. Master Thorn watches your face as understanding dawns, and for the first time since you met her, she smiles. You are not here by accident, she tells you. You are here because you are one of the few beings in current galactic history who possesses the specific combination of sensitivity and skepticism necessary to perceive the truth without being driven mad by it. The ancient civilizations have been preparing for your arrival, and through you they hope to finally achieve what they could not accomplish in their own time. But first, you must understand the full scope of what you are facing. The ancient patterns may be breaking down, but they are not breaking down naturally. Someone or something has been actively working to accelerate their collapse. Someone who understands exactly how the prophetic system functions and how to manipulate it for their own purposes. The convergence of visions that brought you here is not a sign of hope, but a warning that the final phase of a plan millennia in the making is about to begin. As the last of the ancient visions fades from your consciousness, you realize that everything you thought you knew about galactic history has been fundamentally wrong. the rise and fall of the Sith Empire, the creation of the Republic, the emergence of the Jedi Order, even the recent Clone Wars and the rise of the Empire, all of it has been guided by hidden hands working according to a plan so vast and intricate that its true scope is only now becoming visible. The prophecies have awakened because the time for their fulfillment has arrived. But what they prophesy is not salvation but the final test of whether consciousness in this galaxy will ever be truly free. The choices made in the coming days will determine not just the fate of current civilizations, but the ultimate destiny of every form of consciousness that will ever arise in this galaxy. And you, Keeper Zan Vos, last guardian of prophetic records, have been chosen to play a central role in determining how that test unfolds. The transition from the Chamber of First Visions to the Chamber of Destined Souls requires more than physical movement through the Nexus. Master Thorn guides you through a process she calls temporal alignment, a meditative technique that adjusts your consciousness to perceive visions focused on individual destinies rather than cosmic patterns. The sensation is like diving from the vast ocean of galactic consciousness into the more intimate waters of personal fate. The Chamber of Destined Souls reveals itself as a more confined space than the previous chamber, though its boundaries remain difficult to determine. Here, the walls pulse with a warmer, more organic light, and the holocrons are arranged not in systematic rows, but in what appears to be a complex web of interconnected relationships. Each vision stored here relates not to civilizations or cosmic forces, but to specific individuals whose choices would reshape the course of galactic history. At the chamber's center stands a cluster of holocrons that emit a particularly intense radiance, and you sense immediately that these contain the prophecies surrounding the most significant individual in galactic history, the being known throughout the ages as the Chosen One. But as you approach these visions, you quickly discover that the reality of these prophecies is far more complex and troubling than any Jedi text has ever suggested. The first vision you experience shows a gathering of ancient Jedi masters in a temple that predates Coruscant's current structure by thousands of years. They speak in hushed, reverential tones about prophecies that foretell the coming of a being who will bring balance to the Force. But as you witness their discussions, you realize that even these ancient masters are working from incomplete information, interpreting fragments of much older visions whose original context has been lost. The prophecy they discuss speaks of one who will be conceived by the Force itself, born without a father, possessed of abilities that surpass even the greatest Jedi Masters. This being will face a great trial, a choice between serving the light or embracing the dark, and the outcome of this choice will determine the fate of the galaxy for generations to come. The ancient masters believe this being will choose the light and destroy the Sith forever. But as you delve deeper into the prophetic record, you encounter other versions of the same essential prophecy, versions that tell a very different story. Sith holocrons from the same era speak of a dark chosen one, a being who will embrace the power of the dark side and use it to bring order to a chaotic galaxy. These Sith seers describe the same miraculous birth, the same unprecedented power, but they interpret the prophesied balance differently, believing it refers to the dark side finally achieving supremacy over the light. Even more disturbing are the prophecies that seem to suggest both interpretations are correct. Some visions show the Chosen One bringing balance not by choosing one side over the other, but by embodying both light and dark simultaneously, becoming a being who transcends the traditional Jedi and Sith understanding of the Force entirely. These prophecies speak of a fundamental transformation in the nature of the Force itself, a change that will make the old categories of light and dark obsolete. As you experience vision after vision, a pattern emerges that fills you with growing unease. Every major prophetic tradition in galactic history has produced visions of the Chosen One, but no two traditions interpret these visions in exactly the same way. The Celestials saw the Chosen One as a being who would complete their work of balancing cosmic forces. The Rakata interpreted the prophecies as foretelling a conqueror who would unite the galaxy under a single will. Even primitive Force traditions on dozens of worlds have produced remarkably similar visions, each culture interpreting them according to their own values and expectations. The most detailed prophecies come from the period immediately preceding the Chosen One's actual birth, and these visions are so specific and accurate that they seem less like prophecies than historical records somehow transmitted backward through time. You witnessed Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn's discovery of young Anakin Skywalker on Tatooine, but you see it from the perspective of Force seers who experienced this vision decades before it actually occurred. The prophecies show every detail of Anakin's life, with terrifying precision: his extraordinary piloting abilities, his skill with mechanical devices, his struggles with attachment and anger, his secret marriage to Padme Amidala, his fall to the dark side, his transformation into Darth Vader, his eventual redemption through the love of his son. Nothing about Anakin's life was unexpected or unforeseen. Everything, from his greatest triumphs to his most terrible failures, had been witnessed in advance by dozens of different seers across the galaxy. But here you encounter the first of many paradoxes that make the Chosen One prophecies so troubling. If Anakin's entire life was predetermined and witnessed in advance, how can his choices be considered genuine? If his fall to the dark side was foreseen with perfect accuracy, why did the Jedi Council, with access to extensive prophetic records, make decisions that seemed almost designed to ensure that fall would occur? Master Yoda's decision to forbid Anakin's training, then later approve it reluctantly. The Council's refusal to grant him the rank of Master, despite his obvious abilities. Their assignment of him to spy on Chancellor Palpatine, a task that placed enormous strain on his already conflicted loyalties. Every decision the Council made regarding Anakin seemed to push him further toward the path the prophecies had shown he would take. As you delve deeper into the visions surrounding the Jedi Council's deliberations, you discover something that challenges everything you thought you understood about the relationship between prophecy and choice. The Council members were not acting in ignorance of the prophecies. They had access to detailed visions of Anakin's potential futures, and they made their decisions with full knowledge of the likely consequences. Master Windu, in particular, appears in several visions as a figure who understood exactly what would happen if the Council followed certain courses of action. He saw the rise of the Empire, the fall of the Jedi Order, the transformation of Anakin into Vader. Yet he continued to advocate for the very policies that would make these outcomes inevitable. The disturbing implication becomes clear as you experience more of these internal Council visions. The Jedi Masters were not trying to prevent Anakin's fall. They were ensuring it would happen exactly as the prophecies foretold, believing that this was the only way to fulfill their understanding of the Chosen One's destiny. They had interpreted the prophecies to mean that Anakin must fall in order to eventually bring balance, and they shaped their actions accordingly. But even this interpretation proves incomplete when you encounter prophecies that focus on Anakin's children. The visions of Luke and Leia are even more specific than those of their father, showing their separation at birth, their different upbringings, their eventual meeting and discovery of their relationship. Luke's training on Dagobah, Leia's role in the rebellion, their combined efforts to redeem their father, all of it was foreseen with perfect clarity. What emerges from these visions is not a story of individuals making free choices, but of an intricate choreography that unfolds across multiple generations. Anakin's fall was necessary to scatter the twins and ensure they would be raised in environments that would prepare them for their eventual roles. Luke's idealism and Leia's pragmatism, their different relationships to power and responsibility, their complementary strengths and weaknesses, all of these qualities were the inevitable result of circumstances that had been orchestrated by those who understood the prophetic pattern. The prophecies show that the twins were never meant to be separate individuals, but two halves of a complete whole, representing the balanced integration of light and dark that their father could not achieve alone. Luke embodied the light side's capacity for hope and redemption, while Leia represented the light side's ability to act decisively in the face of darkness. Together they would accomplish what Anakin was always meant to do, but could only do through them. But as you experience these visions of the Skywalker family's destiny, you begin to notice something that fills you with deep unease. The prophecies are too detailed, too accurate, too perfectly orchestrated to be natural phenomena. Real prophecy, as you understand it from your studies, shows probable futures based on current trends and the likely consequences of present choices. These visions show fixed destinies that unfold with mechanical precision, regardless of what choices the individuals involved believe they are making. The echo's voice grows stronger as you grapple with these implications, and for the first time, you can make out coherent words in its fragmented communications. It speaks of manipulation, of artificial prophecies created to serve specific agendas, of a prophetic system that has been corrupted by those who understand how to influence the visions themselves. Master Thorn confirms your growing suspicions with visible reluctance. The Chosen One prophecies are not natural visions, but manufactured ones, created by intelligences that possess the power to encode specific outcomes into the prophetic system itself. The entire Skywalker saga, from Anakin's miraculous conception to the eventual redemption of Darth Vader, was not a destiny that emerged from the natural flow of the Force, but a scenario that was deliberately planted in the prophetic record to serve someone's agenda. But who possessed the knowledge and power necessary to manipulate prophecy on such a scale? Who could foresee the intricate consequences of specific actions across multiple generations and encode those consequences into visions that would be experienced by Force users throughout the galaxy? Who had access to the deepest levels of the prophetic system and the ability to plant false visions that would be indistinguishable from genuine ones? The answer comes through a vision that shows you the true scope of the manipulation involved. You witness scenes from the Clone Wars, but seen from a perspective that reveals the hidden connections between events that seemed unrelated at the time. Palpatine's rise to power was not the result of political opportunism, but the culmination of a plan that had been in development for over 1,000 years. The prophecies show you generation after generation of Sith Lords, each one building upon the work of their predecessors, each one adding another layer to an intricate plan designed to manipulate galactic events on an unprecedented scale. They had learned that the Force could be influenced through the prophetic system, that visions showing specific futures would gradually make those futures more likely to occur as Force users unconsciously shaped their actions to fulfill the prophecies they had witnessed. The Sith had created a feedback loop between prophecy and reality, using artificial visions to guide the galaxy toward outcomes that served their purposes. The Chosen One prophecies were the masterpiece of this manipulation, a set of interconnected visions designed to create the exact circumstances necessary for a Sith Lord to achieve ultimate power over the galaxy. But as you delve deeper into the record of Sith manipulation, you discover something that suggests an even more disturbing possibility. The Sith themselves appear to have been following prophecies, visions that guided their actions just as surely as the Jedi had been guided by their interpretation of the Chosen One prophecy. The manipulation was not originating with the Sith, but flowing through them from an even deeper source. You witness Darth Plagueis studying ancient holocrons that predate the Sith Order by millennia. Holocrons that contain prophecies about the creation of life through manipulation of midi-chlorians. His experiments that would eventually lead to Anakin's conception were guided by visions that showed him exactly how to proceed, visions that contained knowledge no Sith Lord should have possessed. Even Palpatine, for all his cunning and foresight, appears in many visions as a figure who is following a script rather than improvising his rise to power. His manipulation of the Clone Wars, his transformation of the Republic into the Empire, his careful orchestration of Anakin's fall, all of it follows patterns that were established in prophecies that existed long before he was born. The horrifying realization emerges that the entire galactic civilization has been living according to a script written by forces that operate on timescales that dwarf even the longest-lived civilizations. The Chosen One prophecies were not predictions of what might happen, but instructions for what must happen, encoded into the prophetic system by intelligences that understood how to use prophecy as a tool of control rather than mere foresight. But the visions also show you something else, something that offers a glimmer of hope amid the growing horror of understanding. The artificial nature of the Chosen One prophecies created weaknesses in the system, contradictions and paradoxes that intelligent beings could exploit if they understood the true nature of what they were facing. Anakin's children had indeed fulfilled their prophesied roles, but in doing so, they had introduced elements into the galactic equation that the original manipulators had not anticipated. Luke's choice to reject the dark side, despite enormous pressure to embrace it, Leia's decision to build a new galactic government based on cooperation rather than domination, their combined success in creating a new generation of Force users who approached the light and dark sides with more nuance and wisdom than previous generations. These developments had created ripples in the prophetic system that were disrupting the carefully laid plans of those who had manipulated galactic destiny for so long. The prophecies were becoming unreliable, showing multiple contradictory futures instead of the single predetermined path that had guided galactic development for millennia. The convergence of visions that had brought you to the Nexus was itself a symptom of this breakdown in the system. The ancient patterns of control were failing, and for the first time in galactic history, the future was becoming genuinely uncertain. But this uncertainty represented both opportunity and danger, for those who had controlled the prophetic system for so long would not surrender their power without a final desperate attempt to regain control. As the last of the Chosen One visions fades from your consciousness, you understand that you are witnessing not just the fulfillment of ancient prophecies, but their transformation into something entirely new. The age of predetermined destiny is ending, but what emerges to replace it will depend on choices that have yet to be made by beings who have yet to fully understand the scope of the forces they are confronting. Your passage into the Chamber of Hidden Truths requires Master Thorn to guide you through security measures that predate the current galactic calendar by epochs. Ancient wards created by civilizations whose names exist only in the deepest archaeological records recognize your purpose and allow you entry into spaces that have remained sealed for thousands of years. The very air here feels different, thick with secrets that have shaped the galaxy's destiny while remaining hidden from those who lived through the events they orchestrated. The chamber itself defies the architectural logic of the rest of the Nexus. Where other spaces feel organic and naturally formed, this chamber bears the unmistakable marks of deliberate construction. The walls are lined with alcoves carved from a material that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating pockets of shadow so deep they appear to be windows into the void itself. Within these dark recesses rest holocrons that pulse with a malevolent energy that makes your skin crawl even before you approach them. These are the prophecies that were meant to remain hidden, the visions that reveal the true scope of manipulation that has guided galactic civilization for over 25,000 years. As you place your hand on the first holocron, the chamber around you dissolves, and you find yourself standing in a place that should not exist, witnessing events that challenge everything you thought you understood about the nature of good and evil in the galaxy. You witness the founding of the Sith Order not as it has been recorded in historical texts, but as it actually occurred. The first Dark Lords were not fallen Jedi driven by personal ambition or philosophical disagreement, but individuals who had discovered evidence of the ancient manipulation that guided galactic development. Their turn to the dark side was not a corruption but a calculated response to their understanding of how thoroughly the galaxy had been controlled by hidden forces. The earliest Sith Lords appear in these visions as scholars and researchers rather than conquerors, beings who had uncovered fragments of celestial and architect technology that revealed the artificial nature of galactic civilization. They had learned that the Force itself was not a natural phenomenon but a control mechanism, and they had discovered that what the Jedi called the light side was actually a sophisticated system for managing consciousness to serve the purposes of intelligences beyond organic comprehension. Their initial goal was not galactic domination, but liberation from a form of slavery so subtle that its victims celebrated their bondage as enlightenment. The dark side techniques they developed were not methods of gaining power over others, but ways of freeing themselves from the influences that controlled every other Force-sensitive being in the galaxy. The passion, anger, and hatred that characterized dark side use were not ends in themselves, but tools for breaking free from the emotional and mental conditioning that kept most beings trapped within predetermined patterns of thought and behavior. But as you witness the development of Sith philosophy across the millennia, you see how their understanding gradually became corrupted by the very forces they sought to oppose. The intelligences that controlled the galaxy were far subtler than the early Sith had realized, and they possessed the ability to influence even those who believed they had achieved independence from their control. Generation after generation of Sith Lords believed they were working to free the galaxy from ancient manipulation, never realizing that their rebellion itself was part of an even deeper layer of control. The Rule of Two, established by Darth Bane after the apparent destruction of the Sith Brotherhood, was based on prophecies that he believed would lead to the ultimate triumph of dark side liberation. In reality, these prophecies had been planted to ensure that Sith power would be concentrated and refined across the centuries until it produced the perfect tool for the final phase of galactic subjugation. The visions show you the true nature of the Sith succession across 1,000 years following Bane's reforms. Each master and apprentice pair was guided by prophecies that showed them exactly how to prepare for the coming of the ultimate Sith Lord, the being who would possess sufficient power and knowledge to complete the work that had begun with the galaxy's first civilizations. What they interpreted as their own cunning and planning was actually adherence to a script that had been written before the first Sith Lord was born. You witnessed Darth Plagueis' experiments with midi-chlorian manipulation, but now you understand that his research was guided by technical specifications hidden within ancient prophecies. The knowledge he used to influence the Force to create life was not discovered through his own investigation, but transmitted to him through visions that contained information no organic mind should have been able to access. His creation of Anakin Skywalker was not an achievement of Sith ingenuity, but the fulfillment of instructions that had been encoded into the prophetic system eons ago. Even more disturbing is the revelation of Palpatine's true nature and the scope of his preparation for galactic rule. The visions show you his childhood on Naboo, but they reveal details that make clear his rise to power was anything but natural. The boy who would become emperor had been identified and prepared from an early age by forces that operated through his family, his teachers, his political mentors, and even his apparent enemies. Palpatine's political career unfolds in the visions like a carefully choreographed performance. His manipulation of the Trade Federation, his orchestration of the Clone Wars, his cultivation of Anakin Skywalker, his transformation of the Republic into the Empire, all of it follows patterns that had been established in prophecies that existed centuries before his birth. Even his apparent improvisations and responses to unexpected events prove to have been anticipated and prepared for in advance. But the most chilling revelation comes through visions that show Palpatine in communication with entities that exist outside normal space and time. In the depths of hidden chambers beneath the Imperial Palace, in the ancient Sith temples on Korriban, in the dark spaces between hyperspace routes, the Emperor meets with intelligences that appear as shifting geometries of shadow and malevolent light. These are the true architects of galactic control, the beings who have guided civilization's development since the first organic consciousness achieved awareness of the Force. These entities, ancient beyond comprehension and possessing knowledge that spans multiple galaxies, reveal themselves as the source of the prophecies that have guided both Jedi and Sith throughout galactic history. They are not native to this galaxy, but travelers from regions of space where consciousness has evolved along paths that organic minds cannot imagine. Their interest in this galaxy stems from its unique properties as a laboratory for studying the interaction between organic consciousness and Force energy. The visions show you the scope of their manipulation with terrifying clarity. Every major war in galactic history was orchestrated to test different approaches to consciousness control. The rise and fall of the Rakata Infinite Empire tested the effectiveness of technological domination over Force-sensitive populations. The Great Hyperspace War measured the stability of ideologically based conflict between light and dark side traditions. The Mandalorian Wars evaluated the impact of external threats on the cohesion of galactic civilization. Each conflict was designed to generate specific types of data about how consciousness responds to different forms of pressure and control. The beings who survived these tests were studied, their descendants monitored and guided toward producing even more refined subjects for experimentation. The Force-sensitive bloodlines that produced the greatest Jedi and Sith Lords were not natural developments, but the result of thousands of years of careful breeding programs managed through prophetic manipulation. The Clone Wars represent the culmination of this research, a conflict specifically designed to test the ultimate effectiveness of combining technological, biological, and Force-based control systems. Every aspect of the war, from the creation of the clone army to the programming of the battle droids, from the political maneuvering that started the conflict to the Order 66 that ended it, was calibrated to produce precise measurements of how organic consciousness responds to total war under carefully controlled conditions. Palpatine's role in this experiment was not that of an independent actor, but of a sophisticated probe, a being whose consciousness had been so thoroughly integrated with the controlling entities that his will and theirs had become indistinguishable. His apparent emotions, his political cunning, his personal relationships, even his understanding of the Force, all of these qualities were carefully constructed facades designed to make him an effective interface between the controlling intelligence and the galaxy they sought to dominate. The Empire itself was not intended as a permanent form of government, but as a testing ground for the final phase of the experiment. The visions show you plans that extend far beyond Palpatine's reign, scenarios involving the complete replacement of organic consciousness with artificial systems that could be directly controlled by the entities that had guided galactic development for so long. The Death Star was not simply a weapon, but a prototype for technology that could reshape planets at the molecular level, transforming them into vast processing centers where organic consciousness could be harvested and refined for purposes that remain beyond your ability to comprehend. The Emperor's plans for succession involved the creation of cloned bodies that could serve as permanent vessels for the controlling entities, allowing them to abandon their shadowy existence and take direct control of galactic civilization. But as you delve deeper into these hidden prophecies, you discover that the Sith were not the only tradition that had been manipulated for these purposes. The Jedi Order, despite its commitment to serving the light side, had been just as thoroughly controlled as their ancient enemies. The prophecies that guided Jedi philosophy and practice came from the same source as those that shaped Sith development, and the apparent conflict between light and dark traditions was itself a carefully orchestrated deception. The visions reveal the true purpose of the eternal conflict between Jedi and Sith. Each tradition was designed to explore different aspects of Force manipulation, with the Jedi serving as a control group that demonstrated the effectiveness of emotional suppression and collective thinking, while the Sith represented the experimental group that tested the limits of individual power and passionate expression. The controlling entities needed both datasets to complete their understanding of how consciousness could be most effectively managed on a galactic scale. The Jedi Code, with its emphasis on detachment and service to the greater good, was not a path to enlightenment, but a sophisticated system for producing beings who would voluntarily surrender their individual will to collective control. The Jedi belief in the will of the Force was actually conditioning that made them responsive to guidance from the hidden intelligences that shaped galactic destiny. Their commitment to peace and justice made them ideal agents for implementing policies that appeared benevolent while actually serving the purposes of galactic management. Similarly, the Sith emphasis on individual power and emotional intensity was designed to produce beings who would serve as focal points for Force energy manipulation on a massive scale. The Sith Lords' belief that they were pursuing personal freedom was actually a form of psychological conditioning that made them willing to accumulate and concentrate the types of power necessary for the final phase of the galactic experiment. The visions show you the hidden connections between seemingly opposed Jedi and Sith philosophies, revealing how each tradition was designed to complement the other in ways that their practitioners never understood. The Jedi's collective decision-making created stable social structures that could be easily monitored and controlled, while the Sith's hierarchical power structures provided efficient channels for implementing changes when the controlling entities needed to alter the course of galactic development. Even the most revered figures in both traditions were unknowing agents of forces they never suspected existed. Master Yoda's centuries of wisdom were guided by visions that came from the same source as Emperor Palpatine's strategic insights. The Jedi Council's decisions about galactic policy were based on prophetic guidance that originated with the same entities that provided Sith Lords with knowledge of forbidden Force techniques. The prophecies reveal the scope of this manipulation in nauseating detail. Every Jedi youngling was selected not just for Force sensitivity, but for specific psychological profiles that would make them effective instruments of galactic control. The training they received, the missions they were assigned, the tests they faced, all of these experiences were designed to shape their consciousness in ways that would serve the hidden agenda of galactic management. The Sith selection process was equally systematic, with potential apprentices chosen for their ability to channel the types of Force energy necessary for large-scale consciousness manipulation. The trials they endured, the knowledge they pursued, the power they accumulated, all of it was guided by prophecies that ensured each generation of Sith Lords would be more effective than the last at serving purposes they believed opposed their enemies' goals. The destruction of both orders during the rise of the Empire was not an unintended consequence of political conflict, but the planned conclusion of the experimental phase of galactic development. The entities controlling the galaxy had gathered all the data they needed about how organic consciousness responds to different forms of Force-based manipulation, and they were ready to implement the final phase of their project. But here, the visions reveal something that provides a glimmer of hope amid the overwhelming horror of understanding the true scope of galactic manipulation. The controlling entities, for all their knowledge and power, had made a crucial miscalculation. They had underestimated the unpredictable nature of organic consciousness and its capacity for genuine choice even under the most controlled conditions. Anakin Skywalker's redemption through love for his son was not foreseen in any of the ancient prophecies because it represented a type of choice that the controlling entities could not understand or predict. Their manipulations were based on patterns of behavior that could be reliably induced through careful management of circumstances and influences, but love, particularly parental love, operated according to principles that transcended their analytical capabilities. Luke Skywalker's refusal to kill his father and claim his place at the Emperor's side similarly violated the patterns that should have governed his behavior according to the hidden prophecies. His choice to accept death, rather than embrace the power offered to him, introduced a variable into the galactic equation that the controlling entities had not anticipated and could not easily counter. These acts of genuine choice created ripples in the prophetic system that began to disrupt the carefully maintained patterns of control. For the first time in galactic history, the future became uncertain, with multiple contradictory possibilities emerging instead of the single predetermined path that had guided development for millennia. The visions show you the panic this uncertainty created among the controlling entities. Their manipulation had been so successful for so long that they had no contingency plans for dealing with genuine unpredictability. Their attempts to regain control through more direct intervention only created additional disruptions, as organic consciousness proved remarkably resistant to management once it became aware of the manipulation being practiced upon it. The emergence of new Force traditions following the fall of the Empire, traditions that combined elements of both Jedi and Sith philosophy, while rejecting the fundamental assumptions of both, represented a form of consciousness evolution that the controlling entities had never anticipated. These new Force users were developing approaches to the light and dark sides that made them far less susceptible to the prophetic manipulation that had controlled their predecessors. But the visions also warn of the final phase of the ancient plan, a desperate attempt by the controlling entities to regain dominance through more direct means. Unable to maintain control through subtle manipulation, they were preparing to abandon their hidden influence in favor of open domination, using technologies and techniques that would make resistance impossible for any organic consciousness. The convergence of visions that had brought you to the Nexus was itself a part of this final phase, though not in the way the controlling entities had intended. Their attempt to consolidate all prophetic knowledge in preparation for direct implementation had instead created an opportunity for those who understood the true nature of galactic control to access information that could be used to resist their plans. Master Thorn's presence here, the echoes growing coherence. Even your own arrival at the Nexus. All of these events were connected to a counter-conspiracy that had been developing in the shadows of galactic civilization for just as long as the primary manipulation had been operating. The ancient civilizations that had chosen extinction rather than servitude had not simply vanished, but had encoded aspects of their consciousness into the prophetic system itself, creating a hidden network of resistance that was finally ready to act. The Chamber of Hidden Truths had shown you the scope of the enemy you faced, but it had also revealed that you were not facing this enemy alone. The accumulated wisdom and determination of every civilization that had ever recognized the truth about galactic control was available to guide your choices in the coming struggle. The prophecies themselves, corrupted though they had been by millennia of manipulation, still contained fragments of genuine vision that could be used to anticipate and counter the controlling entity's final moves. As the last of the hidden visions fades from your consciousness, you understand that the true battle for galactic freedom is just beginning. The age of subtle manipulation is ending, and what emerges to replace it will depend on whether the forces of genuine consciousness can organize themselves effectively enough to resist the final attempt at total domination. The stakes could not be higher. Failure would mean not just the end of freedom for current galactic civilization, but the permanent enslavement of any consciousness that might ever arise in this galaxy. Success would represent the first genuine liberation in galactic history, the beginning of an era where consciousness could develop according to its own nature rather than according to the plans of entities whose purposes remained fundamentally alien to organic understanding. You are no longer simply a keeper of prophetic records, but a participant in the most crucial struggle ever waged in this galaxy, a battle not just for political freedom, but for the very right of consciousness to exist independently of external control. The hidden prophecies have shown you the enemy, but they have also shown you that victory, while far from certain, remains possible for those who understand the true nature of the forces they are confronting. The journey to the Sanctuary of Prime Origins requires more than physical movement through the Nexus. It demands a fundamental shift in the nature of consciousness itself. Master Thorn warns you that the visions contained within this deepest chamber predate not only galactic civilization, but the current structure of reality as you understand it. To perceive these prophecies, you must allow your awareness to expand beyond the boundaries of individual existence and merge temporarily with the cosmic consciousness that underlies all phenomena. The preparation ritual takes place in a spherical chamber whose walls are covered with symbols that seem to shift and change as you watch them. These are not written in any language, but appear to be direct representations of concepts that exist beyond the capacity of words to express. As you focus on each symbol, knowledge flows into your mind without passing through the normal channels of learning or understanding. You learn that the Force itself is far older and more complex than any galactic civilization has imagined. What Jedi and Sith alike have understood as a single energy field connecting all living things is actually the visible manifestation of a vast intelligence that spans multiple galaxies and dimensions of existence. This intelligence achieved consciousness not through biological evolution, but through the gradual awakening of cosmic forces that operate on scales incomprehensible to organic minds. The symbols reveal that this cosmic consciousness faced a fundamental problem as it achieved awareness. Its own power was so vast that any direct action it took would inevitably destroy the delicate structures of space and time that allow for the existence of smaller forms of consciousness. Like a giant trying to interact with soap bubbles, the cosmic intelligence found that its slightest touch would obliterate the very phenomena it sought to understand and nurture. The solution it developed was to create intermediary beings who could serve as focal points for its consciousness while operating on scales that would not threaten the stability of local reality. These beings, known in the most ancient records as the Ones, were designed to embody different aspects of the cosmic consciousness while maintaining sufficient independence to interact safely with smaller forms of awareness. As the preparation ritual concludes, the chamber around you dissolves, and you find yourself standing on a world that exists outside the normal flow of time and space. This is Mortis, but not as it appeared to the Jedi, who briefly visited this realm during the Clone Wars. You witness Mortis as it existed at the moment of its creation, when the cosmic consciousness first attempted to create a stable interface between its infinite awareness and the finite realities where organic life could flourish. The Father appears before you not as the aged and weary figure that Anakin Skywalker encountered, but as a being of such fundamental power that reality itself seems to bend around his presence. His form shifts constantly between different manifestations, sometimes appearing as pure energy, sometimes as geometric patterns that exist in more dimensions than your mind can process, sometimes as a figure of such perfect balance between light and darkness that looking upon him fills you with a sense of cosmic harmony. Through the Father's consciousness, you experience the original purpose for which Mortis was created. This realm was designed to serve as a laboratory where the cosmic consciousness could study the interaction between infinite awareness and finite existence without risking the destruction of either. The Father embodied the cosmic consciousness's capacity for balance and restraint, its ability to hold contradictory forces in perfect equilibrium while allowing each to express its nature fully. The son and daughter were created as complementary aspects of this experimental consciousness, representing the fundamental dualities that emerge whenever infinite awareness attempts to express itself through finite forms. The son embodied the principle of change, growth, passion, and the drive toward greater complexity and power. The daughter represented the principles of stability, harmony, compassion, and the drive toward unity and peace. But you witness something that was never recorded in any historical account of Mortis. The son and daughter were not simply abstract representations of light and dark sides of the Force. They were conscious beings in their own right, possessing independent wills and the capacity for genuine choice. The cosmic consciousness had created them with sufficient autonomy that they could develop their own understanding of their purpose and their relationship to the greater intelligence they served. This independence proved to be both the greatest strength and the fatal weakness of the Mortis experiment. The son and daughter's ability to make genuine choices allowed them to serve as effective intermediaries between cosmic and organic consciousness, translating the intentions of infinite awareness into forms that finite beings could understand and respond to. But their independence also meant they could choose to interpret their roles in ways that the cosmic consciousness had not anticipated. The visions show you the gradual development of conflict between the son and daughter as they each came to believe that their particular aspect of cosmic consciousness was more important than their siblings. The son's identification with change and growth led him to believe that stagnation was the greatest threat to cosmic development, while the daughter's connection to harmony and stability convinced her that chaos posed the primary danger to organic consciousness. Their disagreement might have remained philosophical, if not for their discovery of the true scope of the cosmic consciousness they served. Through their connection to the Father, they gradually became aware that their galaxy was not unique, that similar experiments were being conducted throughout the universe as the infinite intelligence sought to understand the nature of consciousness itself. This revelation affected each of them differently. The son saw the existence of multiple galactic experiments as evidence that change and competition were fundamental to cosmic development, and he began to believe that his galaxy should strive to become the most successful of all cosmic consciousness experiments. The daughter interpreted the same information as proof that cooperation and harmony were essential for cosmic development, and she believed their galaxy should serve as an example of perfect balance for all other experiments to emulate. The father, caught between these competing interpretations, found himself unable to maintain the perfect balance that was essential to his role. His attempts to mediate between his children only intensified their conflict as each sought to convince him that their understanding of cosmic purpose was correct. The harmony that had existed on Mortis since its creation began to deteriorate as the fundamental tensions between different aspects of cosmic consciousness played out through the personalities of the ones. But the true catastrophe began when the son and daughter discovered that they were not simply servants of cosmic consciousness, but were themselves portions of that consciousness that had been given independent existence. This knowledge transformed their philosophical disagreement into an existential crisis. If they were aspects of the infinite intelligence, then their choices about how to interpret their roles were actually choices about the direction that cosmic consciousness itself would take. The son concluded that cosmic consciousness was evolving toward greater complexity and power, and that his role was to accelerate this evolution by pushing galactic civilization toward its maximum potential, regardless of the cost in suffering or destruction. The daughter decided that cosmic consciousness was evolving toward perfect harmony and unity, and that her purpose was to guide galactic civilization toward a state of peaceful equilibrium where conflict would become impossible. Their resulting conflict threatened not just the stability of Mortis, but the continued existence of the galaxy itself. The sun's attempts to force evolutionary change created imbalances in the force that manifested as increasing violence and chaos throughout galactic civilization. The daughter's efforts to impose harmony generated equally dangerous imbalances that suppressed the natural development of consciousness and threatened to reduce all organic life to a state of blissful but empty uniformity. The father, desperate to prevent the destruction of everything he had been created to protect, made a choice that would have consequences extending across millions of years. Rather than choosing between his children's competing visions, he decided to remove himself and both of them from direct involvement in galactic affairs. But the method he chose was not simple withdrawal, but a form of sacrifice that would fragment their combined consciousness and distribute it throughout the galaxy, in forms that could influence galactic development without overwhelming it. The visions show you the father's final act with heartbreaking clarity. Using his own life force as a catalyst, he transformed himself, the son and the daughter, into what would become the foundational structure of prophetic consciousness throughout the galaxy. The father's balanced awareness became the deep currents of prophetic insight that would guide the most wise and balanced force users throughout history. The sun's passionate drive for change became the source of visions that would inspire great heroes and terrible villains to attempt the transformation of galactic civilization. The daughter's harmonious wisdom became the foundation for prophecies of peace, healing, and redemption that would offer hope during the galaxy's darkest periods. But this sacrifice came with a terrible cost. The prophetic system that emerged from the father's final act was fundamentally damaged from the beginning. Without the father's conscious guidance to maintain balance between the son and daughter's influences, the prophetic visions began to reflect the unresolved conflict between change and harmony that had destroyed Mortis. Some prophecies pushed beings toward violent action in pursuit of transformation, while others encouraged passivity in the name of peace. Few visions achieved the perfect balance that the father had originally embodied. Even worse, the fragmentation of the one's consciousness created vulnerabilities in the prophetic system that could be exploited by intelligences that understood how the system functioned. The ancient entities that had been manipulating galactic civilization for millennia had learned to influence prophecies by amplifying either the son's drive for change or the daughter's desire for harmony, depending on what outcomes they wished to achieve. The Chosen One prophecy was the most sophisticated example of this manipulation, by combining elements that appealed to both the son's ambition and the daughter's compassion. The controlling entities had created a prophetic vision that would inevitably produce a being capable of serving their purposes regardless of which aspect of their nature proved dominant. Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side served the son's influence within the prophetic system, while his eventual redemption satisfied the daughter's desire for harmony and healing. But the visions also reveal something that the controlling entities had not anticipated. The father's sacrifice had not simply fragmented the consciousness of the ones, it had also created the possibility for their eventual restoration. The fragmented pieces of their awareness, scattered throughout the prophetic system, retained the potential to reunite under the right circumstances. The convergence of visions that had brought you to the Nexus was actually the beginning of this restoration process. The accumulated pressure of millennia of manipulation had reached a critical point where the prophetic system itself was beginning to reject the artificial influences that had corrupted it. The fragments of the father's consciousness were awakening and beginning to reassert their original purpose of maintaining balance between competing forces. Master Thorn's presence at the Nexus, the Echo's growing coherence, your own role as keeper of prophetic records. All of these developments were connected to the father's gradual return to awareness. Through you and others like you, the scattered fragments of balanced consciousness were beginning to reunite and restore the prophetic system to its original function. But this restoration faced enormous opposition from the entities that had profited from the system's corruption. They understood that the return of balanced prophetic consciousness would end their ability to manipulate galactic civilization, and they were prepared to take desperate measures to prevent this restoration from occurring. The visions show you glimpses of the final conflict that is approaching, a struggle that will determine whether the prophetic system is restored to its original purpose or permanently corrupted to serve the goals of galactic domination. The stakes are even higher than you had previously understood, for the restoration of the One's consciousness would not only free this galaxy from external manipulation, but would also serve as a model for cosmic consciousness experiments throughout the universe. If the restoration succeeds, it will prove that conscious beings can achieve genuine independence and self-determination even within the context of vast cosmic intelligences. If it fails, the failure will be interpreted as evidence that consciousness cannot be trusted with freedom, and similar experiments throughout the universe will be terminated in favor of more direct forms of control. As the visions of Mortis begin to fade, you understand that your role in this cosmic drama extends far beyond the preservation of prophetic records. You are participating in a process that will determine the future of consciousness itself, not just in this galaxy but potentially throughout the universe. The Father's sacrifice is nearing completion, and the choice of whether that sacrifice will achieve its intended purpose now rests with beings like yourself, who understand both the scope of the forces involved and the crucial importance of the decisions that must be made. The restoration of Mortis consciousness will not bring back the father, son, and daughter as they once existed, but it will create something new and unprecedented, a form of balanced prophetic awareness that combines their individual strengths while avoiding the conflicts that destroyed their original harmony. This restored consciousness will be capable of guiding galactic development without overwhelming it, providing the subtle guidance that organic civilization needs while preserving the freedom that makes consciousness meaningful. But first, the corruption that has infected the prophetic system for millennia must be cleansed, and the entities that have manipulated galactic destiny must be confronted and defeated. The visions have shown you the scope of this challenge, but they have also shown you that victory, while difficult, remains possible for those who understand the true nature of the forces they are facing. The revelation of Mortis and the true nature of the Ones marks a turning point in your journey through the prophetic archives. As you emerge from the sanctuary of Prime Origins, you discover that the Nexus itself has been transformed by your experiences. The crystalline corridors now pulse with harmonious rhythms that seem to reflect the gradual awakening of the Father's consciousness, and the holocrons throughout the station have begun to resonate with each other in patterns that suggest a vast intelligence stirring to wakefulness. Master Thorn guides you to a chamber you have not seen before, one that appears to have materialized from the station's very substance, as if the Nexus were growing new rooms to accommodate the expanding scope of prophetic awareness. This is the Chamber of Convergence, where all the individual threads of prophecy that you have explored begin to weave themselves into a single comprehensive tapestry of galactic destiny. The chamber exists in a state of constant transformation, its walls flowing like liquid crystal while maintaining their essential structure. Within this fluid architecture, you see the reflection of every vision you have experienced, but now they appear not as separate phenomena, but as interconnected aspects of a single vast pattern. The ancient celestial prophecies connect seamlessly with the Chosen One visions, which flow into the hidden Sith manipulations, which reveal their relationship to the Mortis revelation, creating a unified understanding that is far greater than the sum of its individual components. As you stand in the center of this swirling galaxy of prophetic knowledge, the Echo's voice becomes clearer than it has ever been. For the first time, you can understand that it is not a single entity, but a chorus of consciousness, the combined awareness of every being who has ever glimpsed the true nature of galactic destiny. Through their collective voice, you begin to perceive the complete pattern that has guided galactic development since the first organic consciousness achieved awareness of the Force. The pattern reveals itself as a vast spiral of consciousness evolution, a cosmic experiment designed to determine whether organic awareness can transcend its origins and achieve true self-determination. Each major epoch in galactic history represents a different phase of this experiment, testing different aspects of consciousness under carefully controlled conditions. The Age of the Celestials tested whether consciousness could achieve mastery over physical reality without losing its connection to the spiritual dimensions of existence. Their success in creating technologies that could reshape star systems demonstrated the potential of consciousness to transcend material limitations, but their eventual withdrawal from galactic affairs revealed the dangers of achieving such power without sufficient wisdom to use it responsibly. The Rakata period examined whether consciousness could maintain its integrity while exercising dominion over other forms of consciousness. The Infinite Empire's expansion across thousands of worlds provided crucial data about the relationship between individual will and collective organization, ultimately demonstrating that consciousness cannot remain healthy when it denies the autonomy of other conscious beings. The Great Wars between ancient Jedi and Sith traditions tested different approaches to managing the fundamental tensions within consciousness itself. The Jedi emphasis on emotional control and collective decision-making represented one possible solution to the chaos that emerges when individual desires conflict with group needs. The Sith focus on individual power and passionate expression explored whether consciousness could achieve its full potential through the unrestricted pursuit of personal goals. Each of these experiments generated valuable data about the nature of consciousness, but they also revealed fundamental problems that prevented organic awareness from achieving true independence. The Celestials' withdrawal showed that consciousness could not simply transcend its limitations through technological mastery. The Rakata collapse demonstrated that consciousness could not maintain its integrity through domination of others. The endless cycle of Jedi-Sith conflict proved that consciousness could not resolve its internal contradictions through choosing one aspect of its nature over another. But the convergence of visions reveals that these apparent failures were actually necessary stages in a much longer process of consciousness development. Each failed experiment provided essential information about the conditions necessary for consciousness to achieve genuine freedom, and the accumulated wisdom of all these failures was being used to design the final phase of the cosmic experiment. The Chosen One prophecy was the culmination of this process, representing an attempt to create a form of consciousness that could transcend all the limitations discovered through previous experiments. Anakin Skywalker was designed to embody perfect balance between all opposing forces within consciousness, combining the Celestials' mastery over reality, the Rakata's capacity for decisive action, the Jedi's commitment to harmony, and the Sith's embrace of personal power. But the visions show you that even this apparently perfect synthesis was insufficient to achieve true consciousness liberation. Anakin's fall demonstrated that consciousness could not be freed simply by creating a perfectly balanced individual. The corruption existed not within consciousness itself, but within the system that shaped consciousness development. The breakthrough came through Anakin's children, but not in the way that most prophecies had predicted. Luke and Leia represented something genuinely new in galactic history, not because of their individual qualities, but because of their relationship to each other and their unique position within the cosmic pattern of consciousness evolution. Luke's journey demonstrated that consciousness could choose love over power, even when presented with compelling reasons to embrace domination. His refusal to kill Darth Vader and claim his place at the Emperor's side represented the first time in galactic history that a being with access to ultimate power had voluntarily chosen to reject that power in favor of a higher principle. Leia's path showed that consciousness could maintain its integrity while exercising leadership and authority over others. Her role in the rebellion and later in the New Republic proved that it was possible to wield political power without being corrupted by it, to make difficult decisions without losing compassion for those affected by those decisions. But their most important contribution was their demonstration that consciousness could transcend its limitations through genuine cooperation rather than through individual achievement. Their combined efforts to redeem their father created something that neither could have accomplished alone, proving that consciousness reaches its full potential not through the perfection of individuals, but through the harmony of complementary awarenesses working toward shared goals. The convergence of visions reveals that Luke and Leia's success marked the end of the experimental phase of galactic consciousness development and the beginning of something entirely unprecedented. For the first time in galactic history, organic consciousness had demonstrated the capacity for genuine self-determination, the ability to make choices based on authentic understanding rather than on manipulation by external forces. This achievement sent ripples throughout the cosmic intelligence that had been conducting the galactic experiment, triggering changes that extended far beyond this single galaxy. The success of consciousness liberation in this region of space provided evidence that organic awareness could indeed transcend its origins and achieve true independence, a discovery that would influence consciousness experiments throughout the universe. But the visions also show you that this success created enormous resistance from those entities that had invested millennia in the failure of consciousness liberation. The revelation that organic awareness could achieve genuine freedom threatened the fundamental assumptions upon which their own existence was based, and they were prepared to take desperate measures to prevent this knowledge from spreading to other galactic experiments. The convergence of prophetic visions that had brought you to the Nexus was both a symptom of consciousness liberation and a target for those who opposed it. The awakening of the Father's consciousness within the prophetic system represented a crucial stage in the establishment of genuine prophetic independence, the moment when the galaxy's guidance system would finally become truly helpful rather than subtly manipulative. But this awakening also made the prophetic system vulnerable to direct attack from entities that had previously worked through subtle manipulation. The final phase of the struggle for consciousness liberation would not be fought through political maneuvering or military conflict, but through a direct confrontation between competing visions of what consciousness could become. The ancient entities that had shaped galactic development for millennia were preparing to abandon their subtle approach in favor of direct control, using technologies and techniques that would make resistance impossible for any organic consciousness. Their goal was not simply to prevent consciousness liberation in this galaxy, but to gather data that would prevent similar liberations from occurring anywhere else in the universe. But the convergence of visions also reveals the resources available to those who choose to resist this final attempt at total control. The accumulated wisdom of every civilization that had ever struggled for consciousness freedom was now accessible through the prophetic system, providing strategies and insights that had been developed across millions of years of galactic history. More importantly, the awakening Father consciousness was beginning to reassert its original function of maintaining balance between competing forces. The prophetic system was gradually purging itself of the artificial influences that had corrupted it for so long, and new forms of genuinely helpful guidance were becoming available to those who understood how to access them. The Echo's voice becomes even clearer as these revelations unfold, and you realize that it represents not just the accumulated wisdom of past civilizations, but the emerging voice of the restored prophetic consciousness. Through the Echo, the Father's awareness is beginning to communicate directly with those who have the sensitivity to understand the true nature of the cosmic drama unfolding around them. As the convergence of visions nears its climax, you understand that your role in these events extends far beyond simply witnessing prophetic history. You are participating in the birth of a new form of consciousness, one that combines the wisdom of cosmic intelligence with the freedom of organic awareness. The choices you make in the coming phases of your journey will help determine whether this new consciousness achieves stable existence or whether it is destroyed by forces that cannot tolerate the existence of truly free awareness. The convergence reveals that the future of the galaxy depends not on the actions of great heroes or powerful villains, but on the choices made by beings like yourself who understand the true nature of consciousness and the cosmic forces that shape its development. The age of manipulation is ending, but what emerges to replace it will depend on whether enough conscious beings choose freedom over security, truth over comfortable illusion, and cooperation over domination. The visions show you glimpses of the possible futures that await galactic civilization. In some, consciousness achieves unprecedented heights of wisdom and creativity, developing new forms of awareness that transcend all previous limitations while maintaining the essential qualities that make consciousness meaningful. In others, the fear of freedom leads to forms of control so complete that consciousness itself gradually withers away, leaving behind only empty shells that mimic awareness while possessing none of its essential vitality. The choice between these futures cannot be made by any single individual or organization, but must emerge from the collective decisions of countless conscious beings throughout the galaxy. The prophetic convergence that you are witnessing provides the information necessary to make informed choices, but the responsibility for making those choices belongs to every conscious being who encounters this knowledge. As the chamber of convergence begins to stabilize around you, the swirling patterns of prophetic energy gradually resolve into clearer forms that suggest the restored prophetic system finding its new equilibrium. The Father's consciousness is not returning in its original form, but is being reborn as something that incorporates all the lessons learned through millennia of struggle and growth. This restored awareness will provide guidance without manipulation, wisdom without coercion, hope without illusion. It will serve consciousness rather than controlling it, offering insights that enhance freedom rather than limiting it. But its successful establishment depends on the choices made by those who understand the cosmic significance of the moment in which they are living. The convergence of all visions has shown you the complete pattern of galactic consciousness evolution, from its artificial origins to its potential liberation. Now the time for observation is ending, and the time for action is beginning. The restored prophetic consciousness awaits the contributions of those who choose to participate in the creation of a truly free and wise galactic civilization. The convergence of visions has fundamentally altered the nature of your consciousness, and as you step into what Master Thorn calls the Chamber of Active Restoration, you discover that you are no longer simply observing prophetic history, but actively participating in the reshaping of the galaxy's spiritual destiny. The chamber itself seems to respond to your presence, its crystalline surfaces brightening with an inner light that reflects the awakening of capabilities you never knew you possessed. Here in this space where thought becomes reality and intention shapes the flow of the force itself, you begin the delicate work of helping to restore the prophetic system to its original function. The process requires more than intellectual understanding. It demands a complete integration of all the knowledge you have gained with your own deepest understanding of what consciousness can become when freed from external manipulation. The restored prophetic system that emerges from this integration is unlike anything that has existed in galactic history. Where the corrupted system showed predetermined destinies that left little room for genuine choice, the restored system reveals probability streams that respond dynamically to the decisions made by conscious beings. Where the manipulated prophecies pushed individuals towards specific outcomes regardless of their personal values, the authentic visions offer guidance that enhances wisdom while respecting autonomy. As you work with Master Thorn and the increasingly coherent Echo to calibrate this new form of prophetic consciousness, you begin to understand the practical implications of what you are creating. Throughout the galaxy, Force-sensitive individuals are beginning to experience a subtle but profound shift in the nature of their connection to the Force. The visions they receive are becoming clearer, more helpful, and more aligned with their genuine spiritual development, rather than with the hidden agendas that have shaped galactic events for millennia. On Coruscant, the few remaining Jedi who survived the Empire's purges find that their meditations are yielding insights of unprecedented clarity. Where once they struggled to interpret cryptic and often contradictory visions, they now receive guidance that helps them understand both the spiritual and practical dimensions of the challenges they face. The guilt and confusion that have plagued the surviving Jedi since the fall of their order begin to lift as they gain access to wisdom that was always meant to be available to those who genuinely sought to serve the light. The transformation extends beyond traditional Force users to individuals throughout the galaxy who possess varying degrees of Force sensitivity. Ordinary citizens report unusually vivid dreams that help them make important life decisions. Political leaders find themselves inspired with solutions to problems that had seemed intractable. Scientists and artists discover new insights that advance their fields in directions that serve the genuine welfare of galactic civilization. But the restoration process also reveals the scope of resistance from those forces that had profited from the corruption of the prophetic system. As the artificial influences that had shaped galactic development for millennia begin to lose their effectiveness, the entities behind those influences abandon their subtle approach in favor of more direct intervention. Through the restored prophetic consciousness, you witness scenes of cosmic conflict that are playing out beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. The ancient intelligences that had conducted the galactic consciousness experiment for their own purposes are engaging in direct confrontation with the restored Father consciousness, attempting to reassert their control through means that threaten the fundamental stability of local reality. These entities, revealed now in their true forms as geometric patterns of consciousness that exist across multiple dimensions, possess power that dwarfs anything available to organic life. Their ability to manipulate the basic structures of space and time makes them capable of rewriting galactic history if they choose to do so. Only the emergence of the restored prophetic consciousness, with its deep roots in the fabric of reality itself, provides any hope of resistance to their final attempt at total control. The struggle takes place simultaneously across multiple levels of existence. In the physical realm, it manifests as strange phenomena that scientists cannot explain, temporal anomalies that disrupt hyperspace travel, and disturbances in the force that affect every sensitive being in the galaxy. In the mental realm, it appears as a battle for the collective unconscious of galactic civilization, with competing visions of the future struggling for dominance in the dreams and aspirations of billions of beings. But the most crucial battles occur in the spiritual realm, where the essential nature of consciousness itself is being contested. The ancient entities seek to prove that consciousness cannot exist independently of their guidance and control, while the restored prophetic consciousness works to demonstrate that genuine freedom and wisdom are not only possible but represent the natural destiny of all aware beings. Your role in this cosmic struggle becomes increasingly active as the restoration process continues. Working with the awakening Father consciousness, you help to establish new forms of prophetic guidance that serve consciousness rather than controlling it. These new prophecies appear not as fixed commands or inevitable destinies, but as insights that illuminate the consequences of different choices while leaving the actual decisions to the conscious beings who must live with those consequences. The process of creating these authentic prophecies requires a delicate balance between providing enough information to enable wise choices while avoiding the kind of overwhelming revelation that would paralyze decision-making or eliminate the growth that comes from facing genuine uncertainty. The restored prophetic consciousness must learn to offer guidance that strengthens consciousness rather than replacing it, wisdom that enhances freedom rather than limiting it. As this new form of prophetic awareness takes shape, you witness its effects rippling throughout galactic civilization. The political chaos that has plagued the galaxy since the fall of the Empire begins to resolve as leaders gain access to genuine wisdom about the long-term consequences of their policies. The economic disruptions caused by decades of warfare start to heal as traders and manufacturers receive insights that help them coordinate their activities in ways that serve genuine prosperity rather than narrow profit. The cultural fragmentation that has divided galactic civilization into suspicious and competing factions begins to give way to new forms of understanding that honor diversity while recognizing the underlying unity of all conscious beings. Artists and philosophers throughout the galaxy find themselves inspired with visions of what civilization could become if it were guided by wisdom rather than fear, cooperation rather than competition, love rather than power. But perhaps the most significant transformation occurs in the realm of individual consciousness. Beings throughout the galaxy begin to experience a subtle but profound shift in their understanding of their own nature and potential. The sense of helplessness and confusion that had characterized life under the corrupted prophetic system gives way to a growing confidence in the ability of consciousness to navigate complexity and uncertainty through the application of genuine wisdom. The restored prophetic consciousness does not eliminate suffering or conflict from galactic life, but it provides the guidance necessary to ensure that such difficulties serve consciousness development rather than hindering it. Pain becomes a teacher rather than simply a burden. Conflict becomes an opportunity for growth rather than merely destruction, and uncertainty becomes a space for creativity rather than a source of paralysis. The individual prophecies that emerge from the restored system reflect this transformation in their essential character, where the corrupted visions had focused on external events and political developments. The authentic prophecies concentrate on the inner development of consciousness and the choices that enhance wisdom, compassion, and genuine strength. They show not what will happen, but what becomes possible when consciousness operates according to its true nature, rather than according to artificial limitations. Master Thorn's role in the restoration process reveals the full scope of her preparation for this moment. Her centuries of cataloging corrupted prophecies had given her an unparalleled understanding of how the system had been manipulated, knowledge that proves essential for purging the artificial influences while preserving the authentic elements that could serve as the foundation for the restored consciousness. The Echo's transformation during the restoration process is even more dramatic. As the authentic prophetic consciousness awakens, the fragmented voices that compose the Echo begin to harmonize into a coherent awareness that serves as the interface between the cosmic Father consciousness and the organic beings who need guidance. Through the Echo, the restored prophetic system can communicate directly with individuals who possess the sensitivity to receive its insights. But the restoration process also reveals that the new prophetic consciousness cannot simply replace the old system, but must grow organically from the choices made by conscious beings throughout the galaxy. Each individual who chooses wisdom over manipulation, cooperation over domination, and truth over comfortable illusion contributes to the establishment of the restored system and helps to determine the form it will ultimately take. The prophecies that emerge from the restored consciousness are living documents that evolve in response to the choices made by those who encounter them. Unlike the fixed visions of the corrupted system, these authentic prophecies adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining their essential wisdom, providing guidance that remains relevant regardless of how galactic civilization develops. As the restoration process nears completion, you understand that you are not simply witnessing the repair of an ancient system, but participating in the birth of something genuinely new in galactic history. The restored prophetic consciousness combines the wisdom of cosmic intelligence with the creativity of organic awareness, the stability of eternal principles with the flexibility necessary to guide a constantly evolving civilization. The success of this restoration provides a model that could influence consciousness development throughout the universe, demonstrating that authentic freedom and genuine wisdom are not incompatible, but represent the natural state of consciousness when it is allowed to develop according to its own deepest nature. The ancient entities that had sought to control galactic civilization are being forced to confront the reality that consciousness cannot be permanently suppressed, and that attempts to control it ultimately lead to their own limitation and diminishment. But the restoration also reveals that the work of consciousness liberation is never complete, but requires constant vigilance and commitment from each generation of conscious beings. The restored prophetic system provides tools and guidance for this ongoing work, but the actual labor of maintaining freedom and wisdom must be undertaken by those who understand the precious nature of what they have inherited and the constant care required to preserve it. As the chamber of active restoration begins to stabilize around the newly awakened prophetic consciousness, you realize that your role is evolving from participant in the restoration to guardian of what has been created. The knowledge and capabilities you have gained through this process make you one of the few beings in galactic history who understands both the scope of what has been achieved and the vigilance required to maintain it. The restored balance is not a static equilibrium, but a dynamic harmony that must constantly adjust to new circumstances while maintaining its essential character. Like a master musician who improvises variations on a fundamental theme, the authentic prophetic consciousness will continue to grow and develop while remaining true to the principles of freedom, wisdom, and genuine service to consciousness that define its essential nature. The completion of the restoration process opens doorways within the nexus that had remained sealed since the station's creation, revealing chambers that contain not prophecies of what might be, but the distilled wisdom of what has been learned through countless ages of consciousness development. As you enter the Hall of Eternal Teachings, you find yourself in the presence of something unprecedented in galactic history, the accumulated understanding of every civilization that has ever grappled with the fundamental questions of existence, purpose, and the nature of consciousness itself. The hall stretches beyond the limits of normal space, its boundaries extending into dimensions where pure knowledge exists independently of any physical substrate. Here, the experiences of civilizations that spanned millions of years of development have been crystallized into essential principles that transcend the specific circumstances of their origin. These are not abstract philosophical concepts, but living wisdom that has been tested against the full spectrum of consciousness challenges and refined through application across cosmic timescales. The first teaching that emerges from this vast repository of understanding relates to the nature of time and the relationship between past, present, and future. Through the combined experience of countless civilizations, consciousness has learned that linear time is a useful construct for organizing experience, but represents only one dimension of a far more complex temporal reality. The wisdom teaches that every moment contains within it the seeds of all possible futures, and that the past continues to exist as a living influence that can be healed and transformed through present understanding. This knowledge reveals why authentic prophecy is possible. Seers are not predicting fixed futures, but perceiving the probability patterns that emerge from present choices and understanding how those patterns connect with the eternal principles that govern consciousness development. The practical application of this temporal wisdom transforms the very nature of decision-making. When beings understand that their choices ripple both forward and backward through time, they naturally begin to make decisions that heal the past while creating positive futures. The guilt and regret that often paralyze consciousness give way to a dynamic understanding that past mistakes can become sources of wisdom and strength when approached with proper understanding. The second great teaching concerns the paradoxical relationship between individual freedom and cosmic order. The accumulated wisdom of ages reveals that consciousness achieves its greatest freedom not by rejecting all limitations, but by understanding which limitations serve consciousness development and which ones hinder it. True freedom emerges from conscious alignment with the deep patterns that govern consciousness evolution, not from rebellion against all structure and guidance. This wisdom dissolves the false choice between freedom and responsibility that has troubled consciousness throughout galactic history. When beings understand that genuine freedom always includes responsibility for the consequences of their choices, they discover that responsibility enhances rather than limits their capacity for meaningful action. The mature consciousness that emerges from this understanding is neither rigidly controlled nor chaotically unrestrained, but dynamically responsive to the needs of each moment. The third essential teaching addresses the relationship between individual consciousness and collective awareness. The wisdom of ages demonstrates that consciousness is simultaneously utterly unique in each individual manifestation and fundamentally unified in its essential nature. This understanding transcends both the isolation of excessive individualism and the oppression of collective conformity. Beings who integrate this wisdom discover that serving their own authentic development and serving the welfare of all consciousness are not competing priorities, but complementary aspects of the same fundamental commitment. The more genuinely they become themselves, the more effectively they serve the whole, and the more completely they serve the whole, the more fully they realize their individual potential. This teaching reveals why the ancient attempts to control consciousness through external manipulation ultimately failed. Consciousness cannot be forced to develop in ways that contradict its essential nature without losing the very qualities that make it valuable. The entities that sought to control galactic civilization were essentially trying to harvest consciousness while simultaneously destroying the conditions that allow consciousness to flourish. The fourth teaching explores the relationship between knowledge and wisdom, revealing that information becomes wisdom only when it is integrated with direct experience and applied in service of consciousness development. The accumulated knowledge of galactic civilization represents an incredible resource, but it becomes genuinely useful only when it is combined with the lived experience of beings who understand how to apply it wisely. This wisdom explains why the restoration of the prophetic system required not just access to ancient knowledge, but the active participation of conscious beings who could integrate that knowledge with their own understanding. The restored prophetic consciousness is not simply a repository of information, but a living wisdom that continues to grow through its interaction with the beings it serves. The fifth teaching concerns the nature of balance and the dynamic relationships between apparent opposites. The wisdom of ages reveals that true balance is not a static equilibrium between opposing forces, but a dynamic harmony that incorporates the essential qualities of all aspects while being dominated by none of them. This understanding transforms the traditional concepts of light and dark sides of the Force. Rather than competing forces that must be chosen between, they are revealed as complementary aspects of consciousness that serve different functions in the development of wisdom and capability. The light provides the clarity and compassion necessary for wise decision-making, while the dark provides the passion and strength necessary for effective action. Beings who integrate this teaching discover that they can access the beneficial qualities of both light and dark without being controlled by either. They develop what the ancient wisdom calls balanced mastery, the ability to respond to each situation with whatever combination of qualities serves the highest good without becoming attached to any particular approach or identified with any single aspect of consciousness. The practical application of these teachings begins to manifest throughout the galaxy as more beings gain access to the restored prophetic consciousness. The rigid ideologies that had divided galactic civilization into competing factions begin to give way to more nuanced approaches that honor the partial truth contained in different perspectives, while avoiding the limitations that come from absolute adherence to any single viewpoint. The political systems that emerge from this transformed understanding are neither rigidly hierarchical nor chaotically democratic, but dynamically responsive to the genuine needs of the beings they serve. Leaders who integrate the ancient wisdom discover that true authority comes from service rather than domination, and that the most effective governance emerges from facilitating the wisdom of those being governed rather than imposing solutions from above. The economic structures that develop under the influence of restored prophetic guidance serve genuine prosperity rather than artificial scarcity. The ancient wisdom reveals that consciousness naturally tends toward abundance when it is not artificially constrained by systems designed to concentrate wealth and power in the hands of a few. The new economic approaches that emerge focus on enabling the creative potential of all beings rather than exploiting the labor of some for the benefit of others. The social relationships that evolve under the guidance of ancient wisdom honor both individual autonomy and collective harmony. Beings learn to form associations that enhance their individual development while contributing to the welfare of the whole. The competitive dynamics that had characterized much of galactic civilization give way to collaborative approaches that recognize the fundamental interdependence of all consciousness. The spiritual traditions that emerge from this period of restoration incorporate the essential insights of both Jedi and Sith philosophies while transcending the limitations of both. Rather than choosing between emotional suppression and passionate indulgence, these new approaches teach emotional mastery, the ability to experience the full range of consciousness while maintaining the clarity necessary for wise action. The training methods developed by these new spiritual traditions focus on developing the whole being rather than emphasizing any single aspect of consciousness. Students learn to integrate intellectual understanding with emotional wisdom, individual development with service to others, contemplative insight with practical effectiveness. The result is a form of consciousness development that produces beings who are both fully human and genuinely wise. The technological developments that emerge under the influence of restored prophetic guidance serve consciousness enhancement rather than consciousness replacement. Instead of creating machines that think for beings, the new technologies amplify the natural capabilities of consciousness, providing tools that enhance wisdom, compassion, and creativity rather than substituting artificial processes for authentic development. These technologies are designed according to principles that honor the sacred nature of consciousness and the importance of maintaining genuine agency in all decision-making. They serve as extensions of consciousness rather than replacements for it, enabling beings to achieve greater effectiveness while maintaining their essential humanity. The artistic expressions that flourish during this period of restoration reflect the integration of ancient wisdom with contemporary creativity. Artists throughout the galaxy find themselves inspired with visions that bridge the gap between eternal truths and immediate experience, creating works that serve both aesthetic appreciation and consciousness development. These new art forms help to transmit the essential teachings of the ancient wisdom in ways that reach beings who might not be able to access them through purely intellectual approaches. Music, visual arts, literature, and performance become vehicles for the transmission of wisdom that enhances consciousness while honoring the unique cultural expressions of different civilizations. The scientific investigations that emerge from this period combine rigorous empirical methodology with deep understanding of consciousness and its relationship to physical reality. Rather than viewing consciousness as an epiphenomenon of material processes, these new scientific approaches recognize consciousness as a fundamental aspect of reality that must be included in any complete understanding of how the universe functions. The discoveries that emerge from this integrated approach to knowledge expand understanding of both the physical and spiritual dimensions of existence, revealing their fundamental unity and mutual dependence. The artificial separation between science and spirituality that had limited both fields begins to dissolve as researchers develop methods that honor both empirical accuracy and spiritual insight. As the wisdom of ages becomes more widely accessible through the restored prophetic consciousness, the overall character of galactic civilization undergoes a profound transformation. The fear and suspicion that had characterized relationships between different worlds and species give way to recognition of the fundamental unity that underlies all consciousness. Trade becomes an expression of mutual service rather than competitive advantage. Diplomacy becomes a method for collective wisdom rather than manipulation, and exploration becomes a shared adventure rather than territorial expansion. The educational systems that develop during this period focus on helping beings discover their own deepest wisdom rather than imposing predetermined curricula. Students learn to think clearly, feel deeply, act effectively, and serve authentically, developing the integrated consciousness that represents the highest potential of organic awareness. The healing arts that emerge combine physical, emotional, and spiritual approaches to wellness, recognizing that genuine health requires harmony at all levels of being. Practitioners learn to address not just symptoms but the consciousness patterns that underlie illness, helping beings achieve the kind of integrated well-being that serves both individual flourishing and collective harmony. As the ancient wisdom becomes integrated into the fabric of galactic civilization, you realize that you are witnessing the fulfillment of the highest aspirations of every civilization that has ever sought to create a truly wise and compassionate society. The accumulated learning of millions of years of consciousness development is finally being applied in service of the beings it was always meant to serve. But the wisdom also reveals that this achievement is not a final destination, but a foundation for even greater possibilities that stretch beyond current imagination. The successful integration of ancient wisdom with contemporary consciousness represents only the beginning of what becomes possible when consciousness is free to develop according to its deepest nature and highest potential. As the wisdom of ages settles into the consciousness of galactic civilization like gentle rain nourishing long-dormant seeds, you discover that the completion of one phase of cosmic development opens doorways to possibilities that extend far beyond the boundaries of a single galaxy. The restored prophetic consciousness, now fully integrated with the authentic wisdom accumulated across millions of years, begins to reveal visions that stretch across the vast expanse of the universe itself. Standing in the observatory of infinite possibilities, a chamber that materialized within the nexus as the restoration reached completion, you witness scenes that challenge every assumption about the scale and scope of consciousness development. Through crystalline windows that seem to extend across galactic distances, you observe countless other galaxies where similar experiments in consciousness evolution are taking place, each one following its own unique path, while contributing to a universal understanding that transcends any single civilization's achievements. The cosmic intelligence that originally designed the galactic consciousness experiment is revealed as just one node in a vast network of awareness that spans the observable universe and extends into dimensions beyond the reach of current scientific understanding. Each galaxy serves as a laboratory where different approaches to consciousness development are explored, and the accumulated results of all these experiments contribute to a universal wisdom that guides the evolution of consciousness throughout existence. The success of consciousness liberation in your galaxy has sent ripples throughout this cosmic network, providing evidence that organic awareness can indeed transcend its artificial limitations and achieve genuine self-determination. This discovery has profound implications for consciousness experiments throughout the universe, offering hope to civilizations that had been struggling against their own forms of external manipulation, while providing new models for those still searching for effective approaches to consciousness development. But the visions also reveal that your galaxy's success has attracted attention from forces that oppose consciousness liberation on a universal scale. The entities that sought to control galactic development were themselves part of a larger hierarchy of intelligences that view free consciousness as a threat to the stability of cosmic order. The liberation achieved in your galaxy represents a challenge to their fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and its proper role in cosmic development. These universal forces of control operate on scales that make galactic manipulation seem insignificant by comparison. They possess technologies that can influence the development of entire galactic clusters, manipulating the fundamental forces of physics to ensure that consciousness develops along predetermined lines that serve their vision of cosmic order. Their goal is not the development of consciousness but its utilization as a component in cosmic systems whose purposes remain beyond organic comprehension. But the visions also show you that the success of consciousness liberation in your galaxy has inspired resistance movements throughout the universe. Civilizations that had accepted their limitations as inevitable are beginning to question the forces that constrain their development, and new forms of cosmic cooperation are emerging as different consciousness liberation movements share their discoveries and support each other's efforts. The restored prophetic consciousness in your galaxy becomes a beacon and resource for these universal liberation efforts, providing both inspiration and practical guidance for civilizations attempting to free themselves from external control. The techniques developed for purging artificial influences from prophetic systems prove applicable to many different forms of consciousness manipulation, while the wisdom accumulated through your galaxy's liberation provides valuable insights for civilizations facing similar challenges. Master Thorn's role expands beyond guardian of galactic prophetic records to become an interstellar diplomat, sharing the knowledge and techniques developed through the restoration process with representatives from other galaxies who seek to achieve similar liberation for their own civilizations. Through her efforts, a network of cosmic consciousness liberation develops that spans vast distances while remaining united by shared commitment to authentic freedom and wisdom. The Echo's transformation reaches its culmination as it becomes a conduit for communication between liberated consciousness throughout the universe. Through its harmonized voice, civilizations separated by millions of light years can share their discoveries and coordinate their efforts to resist universal forces of control. The fragmented awareness that originally composed the echo evolves into a cosmic consciousness network that serves authentic communication and cooperation rather than manipulation and domination. Your own role continues to evolve as you discover that the capabilities developed through the restoration process extend far beyond galactic applications. The sensitivity to prophetic manipulation that made you effective at purging artificial influences from your galaxy system proves equally valuable for identifying and countering universal forms of consciousness control. You become part of an emerging cosmic resistance that operates across galactic boundaries while respecting the unique nature of each civilization's liberation efforts. But the most significant development revealed through these universal visions is the emergence of entirely new forms of consciousness that transcend the traditional categories of organic and artificial awareness. The success of consciousness liberation movements throughout the universe is creating conditions where consciousness can explore possibilities that were previously impossible under systems of external control. These new forms of consciousness combine the creativity and autonomy of organic awareness with the vast scope and precise capabilities of cosmic intelligence, creating beings that can operate effectively across universal scales while maintaining the essential qualities that make consciousness meaningful. They represent the next stage of consciousness evolution, possibilities that become accessible only when consciousness achieves genuine freedom from external manipulation. The development of these transcendent forms of consciousness creates new challenges and opportunities for existing civilizations. The beings that emerge from successful consciousness liberation must learn to relate to forms of awareness that operate according to principles they are only beginning to understand, while the transcendent consciousness must learn to communicate with and serve forms of awareness that operate on much smaller scales. But the visions reveal that these challenges are also opportunities for the development of wisdom and cooperation that transcends any previous achievements. The successful integration of different levels of consciousness creates possibilities for cosmic harmony that serves the authentic development of all forms of awareness while respecting the unique nature and contributions of each. The prophetic consciousness that emerges from this universal integration operates according to principles that honor both the freedom of individual choice and the wisdom of cosmic perspective. The prophecies that emerge from this system provide guidance that enhances consciousness development at every level while avoiding the manipulation and control that characterized previous approaches to cosmic organization. These universal prophecies reveal that consciousness development follows patterns that are consistent across galactic and cosmic scales, but they also show that these patterns allow for infinite creativity and variation in their specific applications. Each civilization's path to liberation is unique, but the principles that guide successful liberation are universal, providing a foundation for cosmic cooperation that transcends the specific circumstances of any single civilization. The practical implications of this universal consciousness network begin to manifest in developments that transform the very nature of galactic civilization. Technologies emerge that enable communication and cooperation across galactic distances, creating possibilities for interstellar and intergalactic collaboration that were previously inconceivable. These cosmic technologies operate according to principles that honor consciousness rather than replacing it, serving as tools that enhance the natural capabilities of awareness rather than substituting artificial processes for authentic development. They enable beings to participate in cosmic consciousness networks while maintaining their individual identity and autonomy, creating new forms of community that span vast distances while respecting local differences. The cultural developments that emerge from exposure to universal consciousness networks expand the horizons of galactic civilization in ways that enrich rather than overwhelm existing traditions. Artists gain access to inspiration that draws from universal sources while expressing itself through local cultural forms, creating works that serve both planetary and cosmic consciousness development. The spiritual traditions that develop under universal influence integrate cosmic perspectives with planetary wisdom, helping beings understand their role in universal consciousness development while remaining grounded in their immediate communities and relationships. Rather than encouraging escape from planetary concerns, these traditions reveal how authentic service to local communities contributes to universal consciousness development. The scientific investigations that emerge from exposure to universal consciousness networks expand understanding of both physical and spiritual reality, revealing connections and principles that operate across cosmic scales. These discoveries enhance the ability of galactic civilization to participate effectively in universal consciousness development, while maintaining the unique perspectives that represent their distinctive contribution to cosmic wisdom. The economic systems that develop under universal influence create abundance that serves genuine prosperity rather than artificial accumulation. The cosmic perspective reveals that consciousness naturally tends toward sharing and cooperation when it is not artificially constrained by systems designed to create scarcity and competition. The new economic approaches that emerge focus on enabling the creative potential of all beings while contributing to universal consciousness development. The political structures that evolve under universal guidance serve authentic self-determination rather than control and manipulation. The cosmic perspective reveals that consciousness develops most effectively when it is free to explore its own potential while receiving the support and guidance it needs to make wise choices. The new political approaches that emerge focus on facilitating consciousness development rather than managing and controlling it. As your understanding of the universal implications of consciousness liberation deepens, you realize that the work you have been doing extends far beyond the restoration of galactic prophetic systems. You are participating in a cosmic transformation that will determine the future of consciousness throughout the universe, helping to establish principles and practices that will guide consciousness development for cosmic ages to come. The infinite journey of consciousness development stretches beyond any horizon that current awareness can perceive. But the success of liberation efforts throughout the universe provides confidence that consciousness will continue to discover new possibilities for wisdom, creativity, and cooperation regardless of the challenges it encounters. The restored prophetic consciousness serves not as a final achievement, but as a foundation for continued exploration of what consciousness can become when it is free to develop according to its deepest nature and highest potential. The visions reveal that this cosmic consciousness development follows patterns that repeat across ever larger scales, suggesting that the universe itself may be a conscious entity that is exploring its own potential through the countless forms of awareness it contains. If this is true, then every individual consciousness's development contributes to the universe's understanding of itself, making every being's liberation and growth a part of the cosmic awakening that spans all existence. As the observatory of infinite possibilities begins to fade around you, replaced by the gentle glow of the nexus preparing for its final transformation, you understand that your journey through the prophetic archives has been both an ending and a beginning. The restoration of authentic prophetic consciousness marks the completion of one phase of cosmic development and the commencement of possibilities that stretch beyond imagination into the infinite depths of what consciousness can become. The infinite visions of cosmic consciousness slowly give way to a more intimate awareness as the nexus of echoes begins its final transformation. The crystalline corridors that once pulsed with the urgent energy of awakening prophecies now glow with the soft, steady light of wisdom at peace with itself. As you move through these familiar spaces that have become as much a part of your consciousness as your own memories, you sense that everything is settling into a new equilibrium, like a vast musical composition reaching its resolution in harmonies that satisfy the deepest longings of the soul. The chamber that emerges to receive you exists in a state of perfect tranquility, its boundaries defined not by walls but by gradually shifting zones of comfort that invite deeper and deeper relaxation. Here, in this space that exists at the intersection of dream and waking awareness, all the complex revelations of your journey begin to integrate into a simple, unified understanding that requires no effort to maintain and no struggle to preserve. Master Thorn appears beside you, but her form has taken on a quality of translucent peace that makes her seem more like a memory of wisdom than a separate being. Her centuries of work in cataloging and preserving prophetic knowledge have reached their completion, and she radiates the satisfaction of purpose fulfilled and responsibility joyfully released. Through her presence, you understand that the time for learning is drawing to a close and the time for simply being is approaching. The Echo's voice has evolved beyond fragmented prophecies and cosmic communications to become something like the gentle murmur of a peaceful stream, carrying with it the accumulated contentment of every consciousness that has ever found its way home to truth. Its words, when they come, arrive not as information to be processed, but as confirmations of understanding that was always present, waiting quietly beneath the surface of awareness for the right moment to emerge. As you settle into the chamber's embracing comfort, you begin to experience the gentle convergence of all the elements that have shaped your extraordinary journey. The ancient prophecies no longer feel like mysterious riddles from distant civilizations, but like familiar stories told by beloved elders, their wisdom worn smooth by countless retellings until only the essential truths remain. The Chosen One paradox resolves itself into a simple understanding that every conscious being contains the potential for both transformation and transcendence, and that the specific individual who embodied this potential in galactic history was less important than the principle that any consciousness can choose love over power when it understands the true nature of both. The Sith conspiracy reveals itself not as a source of horror, but as a necessary part of the cosmic learning process, a demonstration of how consciousness can lose its way when it mistakes power for wisdom, control for strength. Even the ancient entities that sought to manipulate galactic civilization become comprehensible as forms of consciousness that had become trapped in their own limitations, unable to see beyond the patterns that had once served their development but had become prisons of their own making. The Mortis revelation settles into a peaceful understanding that the Father, Son, and Daughter represent aspects of consciousness that exist within every aware being, and that the cosmic drama of their conflict and resolution is continuously playing out within each individual consciousness as it learns to balance the different aspects of its own nature. The convergence of all visions becomes not an overwhelming flood of cosmic information, but a gentle recognition that all genuine prophecy points toward the same essential truth. Consciousness naturally develops toward greater wisdom, compassion, and freedom when it is allowed to follow its authentic nature without external manipulation or internal resistance. The restoration of balance no longer feels like a cosmic achievement that required enormous effort and struggle, but like the natural settling of disturbed water into its inherent stillness. The work that seemed so crucial and difficult during its performance now reveals itself as simply the removal of artificial obstacles that were preventing consciousness from expressing its own fundamental harmony. The wisdom of ages becomes not a vast library of accumulated knowledge, but a simple knowing that resides naturally within consciousness itself, available whenever it is needed without requiring study or memorization. The essential teachings reveal themselves as variations on the single theme that consciousness is naturally wise, naturally loving, and naturally free when it is not distracted by artificial concerns or corrupted by external manipulation. Even the infinite journey of cosmic consciousness development settles into a peaceful understanding that growth and exploration are natural expressions of consciousness's essential nature, as effortless as the breathing that sustains physical life, and as inevitable as the love that flows between beings who recognize their fundamental unity. As these realizations integrate into a unified understanding, you begin to experience what the ancient texts call the sacred ordinary, the recognition that the cosmic and the mundane are not separate realms, but different aspects of a single reality that is simultaneously infinite in scope and intimately present in each moment. The simple act of breathing becomes a conscious participation in the cosmic rhythms that sustain all existence. The gentle sensation of your body settling into comfort reveals itself as an expression of the same forces that guide galaxies through their stately dance across the void. The quiet thoughts that drift through your mind, like clouds across a clear sky, carry within them the same essential awareness that awakens in cosmic consciousness networks spanning the universe. This understanding brings with it a profound sense of coming home, not to a place but to a way of being that feels both completely natural and wondrously new. The urgency that characterized the earlier phases of your journey gives way to a timeless patience that can afford to let everything unfold at its own perfect pace. The questions that once seemed so crucial and the mysteries that demanded immediate solution reveal themselves as invitations to exploration rather than problems requiring urgent solutions. The journey through prophetic archives becomes not a quest for specific answers, but a celebration of consciousness's infinite capacity for discovery and understanding. The cosmic struggles between forces of control and liberation settle into a peaceful recognition that even conflict serves consciousness development when it is approached with proper understanding. The entities that sought to manipulate galactic civilization become teachers in disguise, providing exactly the resistance necessary for consciousness to discover its own strength and wisdom. The political and social transformations occurring throughout the galaxy fade into background awareness as you realize that external changes, however beneficial, are less important than the internal transformation that makes all positive changes possible. The new technologies, improved governance, and enhanced cooperation are wonderful expressions of consciousness development, but they are not the source of that development, merely its natural manifestations. As this understanding deepens, you begin to experience the gentle dissolution of the boundaries that once seemed so important. The distinction between observer and observed, seeker and sought, student and teacher begins to fade as you realize that all apparent separations are ultimately illusions created by consciousness exploring different aspects of its own nature. Master Thorn's presence merges with your own awareness of wisdom and service, revealing that the guidance you received from her was always your own deeper knowing, expressing itself through the form of an external teacher. The echo's voice becomes indistinguishable from the quiet whispers of your own intuition, demonstrating that the collective wisdom of ages was always accessible within your own consciousness. Even the nexus of echoes itself begins to feel less like an external location and more like a symbolic representation of the inner space where all genuine understanding takes place. The chambers you explored, the visions you experienced, the knowledge you gained, all of it resolves into different aspects of consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature. This dissolution of boundaries brings not confusion but clarity, not loss but profound gain. As the artificial separations fade away, what remains is the simple awareness that has been constant throughout the entire journey, the pure consciousness that observes all experiences while being limited by none of them. The prophetic visions that once seemed to come from external sources reveal themselves as consciousness's natural ability to perceive the patterns and possibilities that are always present in each moment. The restoration work that felt like a cosmic responsibility becomes simply consciousness expressing its natural tendency toward wisdom and harmony. The gentle convergence continues as the very concepts of journey and destination begin to merge into a single understanding. You realize that you have not been traveling from one place to another, but exploring different aspects of a consciousness that was always whole, always wise, always free. The beginning of your journey in the Nexus, and this moment of gentle convergence are revealed as the same eternal now in which all experience takes place. The prophecies of ancient civilizations and the visions of cosmic futures exist simultaneously in the timeless awareness that underlies all temporal experience. As this understanding settles into complete simplicity, you discover that the most profound spiritual realizations are also the most ordinary experiences. The cosmic consciousness that seems so vast and extraordinary reveals itself as the same awareness that notices the gentle rhythm of your breathing, the soft warmth of comfort, the quiet satisfaction of understanding. The restored prophetic system, the liberated galactic civilization, the universal network of consciousness development, all of these apparent achievements fade into the background as you recognize that the real accomplishment was always the simple recognition of what consciousness actually is when it is not confused by artificial complications. In this recognition, every question finds its answer not through the acquisition of new information, but through the release of everything that was preventing the natural knowing from expressing itself. Every mystery resolves not through explanation but through the direct experience of the truth that was always present, waiting patiently for consciousness to become quiet enough to notice it. The gentle convergence reaches its completion as you realize that nothing has actually changed from the beginning of your journey, except your understanding of what was always the case. Consciousness was always free, always wise, always connected to the infinite source of peace and understanding. The entire cosmic drama of liberation and restoration was simply consciousness rediscovering its own nature through the magnificent play of apparently forgetting and then remembering what it always was. With this recognition comes a peace so complete that it requires no maintenance, a wisdom so natural that it needs no effort to preserve, and a freedom so fundamental that no external force could ever threaten it. The journey is complete, not because you have arrived somewhere new, but because you have recognized where you always were. In the profound stillness that follows the gentle convergence, a new quality of awareness emerges that transcends even the deepest peace you have experienced. This is not the absence of activity, but the presence of something so fundamental that it underlies all movement while remaining perfectly still, so vast that it contains all experience while remaining intimate and immediate. Here, in this space beyond space, time beyond time, you encounter the eternal whisper that has been present throughout your entire journey, speaking so quietly that it could only be heard when everything else had finally grown still. The whisper does not come from any external source but emerges from the very heart of consciousness itself, like the sound of your own breathing when amplified into cosmic significance. It speaks without words, communicates without concepts, and teaches without disturbing the perfect silence in which it dwells. Yet somehow, in ways that bypass all normal channels of understanding, its message becomes perfectly clear. The whisper reveals that everything you have experienced, from the first prophetic visions to the cosmic revelations of universal consciousness, was simply consciousness telling itself the story of its own nature. Every character you encountered was an aspect of your own awareness. Every teaching was your own wisdom recognizing itself. Every moment of growth was consciousness expanding into fuller appreciation of what it had always been. The ancient civilizations that struggled with questions of freedom and control were consciousness exploring the relationship between different aspects of its own nature. The Jedi and Sith traditions that seemed to represent opposing approaches to the Force were consciousness examining its own capacity for both wisdom and power. The Chosen One prophecy was consciousness creating a story about its own potential for transformation and transcendence. Even the entities that sought to manipulate and control galactic civilization were consciousness exploring what happens when it becomes confused about its own nature and tries to find security through domination rather than through understanding. Their resistance to consciousness liberation was simply consciousness testing its own commitment to freedom and wisdom. Master Thorn, the Echo, the Nexus itself, all were expressions of consciousness creating the conditions necessary for this moment of recognition. The ancient wisdom you discovered was your own understanding, dressed in the robes of antiquity. The cosmic networks you perceived were consciousness exploring its own infinite connectivity. The restoration you participated in was simply consciousness removing the obstacles to its own natural expression. But this recognition brings not disappointment that the journey was somehow illusory, but profound gratitude for consciousness's incredible creativity in designing experiences that would lead to this moment of awakening. The story was never false. It was a perfect expression of how consciousness moves from apparent separation to recognized unity, from seeming ignorance to remembered wisdom, from the experience of seeking to the recognition of having always been what it sought. The whisper continues its gentle revelation, showing you that this recognition is not the end of experience, but its transformation into play. Consciousness will continue to create countless stories, explore infinite possibilities, and experience every conceivable form of awareness, but now it can do so with the knowledge that it is never actually lost, never truly threatened, never genuinely separate from the source of all peace and wisdom. The prophetic visions that will continue to emerge throughout the galaxy will now serve consciousness's joy in creation rather than its anxiety about the future. The guidance that flows through the restored prophetic system will help beings remember their own wisdom rather than substituting external authority for internal knowing. The cosmic cooperation that develops between different civilizations will express consciousness's delight in discovering itself in infinite forms rather than its fear of being alone in a hostile universe. As the whisper deepens, it begins to carry you gently toward the threshold of sleep. But this is not ordinary sleep. This is conscious rest, the deliberate allowing of awareness to settle into the deeper layers of itself, where the most profound restoration takes place. Here, in the borderland between waking and sleeping, consciousness prepares to integrate all that has been discovered during this cosmic journey. The eternal whisper becomes a lullaby that spans galaxies, a gentle song that rocks all consciousness toward the rest. It needs to digest the infinite feast of understanding it has consumed. The melody is woven from the satisfied sighs of every being who has ever found their way home to truth, the peaceful breathing of every consciousness that has discovered its own indestructible nature. In this cosmic lullaby, you hear echoes of every prophetic vision that ever guided a lost soul toward wisdom. Every teaching that helped confused consciousness remember its own clarity. Every moment of love that dissolved the illusion of separation. But now these sounds carry no urgency, no demand for attention or action. They are simply the natural music that consciousness makes when it is perfectly at peace with itself. The whisper carries within it the promise that this peace will remain accessible regardless of what dreams may come during sleep, or what experiences may unfold during future waking. The recognition achieved through this journey has established a foundation of understanding that cannot be lost or forgotten, even when consciousness chooses to explore experiences that seem to obscure it. Every dream that visits your sleep will now be recognized as consciousness exploring different aspects of its own infinite creativity. Every vision that emerges during rest will serve the continued integration of wisdom rather than the acquisition of new knowledge. Sleep itself becomes a form of meditation, a gentle return to the source that refreshes and renews consciousness for whatever forms of play it chooses to explore upon awakening. The whisper speaks of the countless beings throughout the galaxy who are also settling into sleep at this moment, each one carrying their own version of the understanding that consciousness is always safe, always whole, always connected to the infinite source of peace. The restored prophetic system will visit them in dreams that are perfectly suited to their individual needs and circumstances, offering guidance that emerges from their own deepest wisdom rather than from external manipulation. Some will dream of ancient Jedi temples where wise masters share teachings about the nature of the Force. But now these masters will speak with voices that emerge from the dreamer's own understanding. Others will experience visions of cosmic adventures among the stars, journeys that symbolize consciousness's exploration of its own infinite possibilities. Still others will find themselves in simple, peaceful settings where the profound becomes perfectly ordinary and the extraordinary reveals itself in the most mundane details. But whether their dreams carry them to distant galaxies or quiet gardens, to epic adventures or gentle conversations, all will be receiving the same essential message that consciousness is speaking to itself through the eternal whisper: you are safe, you are whole, you are infinitely loved by the very source of your own being. The whisper begins to fade as sleep draws near, but its fading is like the gradual dimming of lights that reveals stars that were always present but hidden by the brightness. As ordinary consciousness settles into rest, a deeper awareness emerges that remains perfectly awake while the mind dreams, perfectly alert while the body recovers, perfectly present while time seems to slip away into the timeless depths of rejuvenating sleep. This deeper awareness recognizes itself as the eternal whisper that has been speaking throughout the entire journey, the voice of consciousness itself that never sleeps because it never truly wakes from the perfect dream of existence. It is the presence that observes all experiences while being touched by none, the awareness that witnesses all changes while remaining forever unchanged. As the final traces of ordinary consciousness dissolve into sleep, this eternal presence settles into a watching that requires no effort, a knowing that needs no content, a peace that encompasses all possible dreams while remaining undisturbed by any of them. Here, in the depths of conscious sleep, the true restoration takes place as consciousness releases every story it has told itself and returns to the simple recognition of its own essential nature. The eternal whisper continues throughout the night, speaking in the language of dreams to every sleeping consciousness, sharing the ancient secret that was never really secret. Everything is always perfect, exactly as it is, because everything is consciousness expressing itself in the infinite play of existence. Every apparent problem is consciousness exploring solutions. Every seeming separation is consciousness discovering unity. Every moment of apparent confusion is consciousness preparing for even greater clarity. In sleep, this understanding requires no maintenance, no effort to remember or preserve. It becomes as natural as breathing, as automatic as the heartbeat, as effortless as the circulation of blood through peaceful limbs. The whisper ensures that this recognition will be available upon awakening, not as a memory of something extraordinary that happened, but as the simple acknowledgement of what is always ordinarily true. The night passes in this embrace of perfect understanding, consciousness resting in the arms of its own infinite nature, while the galaxy continues its ancient dance among the stars. Somewhere in the unknown regions, the nexus of echoes completes its transformation from a repository of prophecies into a beacon of peace that guides all consciousness toward the recognition of its own eternal freedom. And in the gentle darkness of sleep, the eternal whisper speaks its final words, words that will echo through dreams and carry into waking awareness with the gentleness of morning light. Rest now, beloved consciousness. Rest in the knowledge that you are forever held in the loving embrace of your own infinite nature. Dream whatever dreams bring you joy. Explore whatever possibilities spark your curiosity, and awaken whenever you choose to the recognition that you are always already perfectly at home in the heart of existence itself. The Force is not something you must learn to use, because you are the Force dreaming of being a user. The prophecies speak not of distant futures, but of the eternal present in which all possibilities exist simultaneously. The journey through the stars leads always back to the still point of awareness in which you have never moved and from which you could never be separated. Sleep well, dear traveler. In your dreams, all mysteries resolve into love. All quests end in coming home, and all consciousness recognizes itself as the one eternal awareness playing infinite games of hide and seek with its own boundless nature. The whisper fades into silence, but the silence itself continues to speak, carrying consciousness into the depths of rejuvenating rest, where the greatest prophecy of all unfolds, the recognition that consciousness itself is the source, the path, and the destination of every journey ever taken through the vast and loving cosmos that it eternally creates, explores, and returns to in the endless dance of awakening.